The argument and points raised by myself and Wooden Nichols in the video are vital. They are vital to this discussion and the future of the old world order conspiracy. I recently received a comment on X that has propelled me to, once again, engage with this discussion about historical photographs. The commenter asked, do you ever feel that your old evidence was abandoned too quickly in light of new, potentially misleading evidence? This is supposedly a picture of the Empire State Building mid-construction. And they attached a screenshot. Here's a construction photograph of the Empire State Building. They have uploaded the photograph to fake.
Hi, Mike. Good to see you. Everybody, Raphael, David, Alexander. This is Stellium 7. Mike, how are you today? And thanks for joining us.
I'm good. Thanks. Nice to talk to you guys.
Nice to meet you.
Welcome. Thanks for joining. That's awesome.
Great. I just stopped the video just to say hello to Mike, but also if you guys want to address this question by Mark Bloom, and you guys remember Mark Bloom, he was part of the panel before, so he is asking. Well, I asked him to join, but he was a little bit reluctant because actually, he doesn't feel very comfortable about the subject, but that's fine. That's his perspective, and that's fine. But he asked, how are we determining which photographs are fake AI and which ones aren't? Is it objectively determined or just whatever suits the narrative the individual is supporting of? So anybody wants to address this question before we continue?
Yeah, I definitely have some things to add here, because usually you can, like, okay. Well, I'm an artist, so I have some experience with how human art looks, I think. Generally, you can tell pretty easily if it's done by hand. Even if it's done like digitally, you can usually tell. art generally either has like pretty visible artifacts, like especially with the hands, especially if you let it draw humans, then you get all these fingers and stuff. That's a big part of it, but that's, lately it's been getting less extreme. But the other thing is that it generally tends to look a little too perfect, or a little. It's got that uncanny feel to it. But yeah, it's getting tougher by the day to tell exactly if it's AI or not, obviously.
And of course, as David wants to say right now, there is tools which you can at least to the degree that it is possible, like hack, counter hack, determine potentially AI generated videos. But of course, also, if it is true, as people always love to say, the military is ahead of us for decades. If any of that is true in regards to AI or image manipulation, then good morning, good night, anyways.
Yeah, just quickly on the tool. So you probably all saw these images of the royal family in Britain, where everyone was wondering, where's this person? And then they published an image. And it was obviously fake. It had hand and finger artifacts and weird shit. But you would put it into these fake AI image detectors, like what you're seeing here, or like the biggest one is actually called Hive. It's a browser extension, and it will come up as completely authentic, normal photo, right? So that kind of tells you that depending what your image shows, they already have deals with the image detectors, and you cannot trust them, basically. So you can use them as like a low level thing, but what you really also need to do is some other things. Like I said, look at TinEye, look at Google Lens, look when the image was first published. Is it like, looks like, has it organically spread, or was it like put out at some point, or and other things, like look for image artifacts, or that will be gone in a few months probably. And just use like detective thinking, use like common sense, like David Ewing Jr. is often doing with the photos. Yeah, that's what I can say on that.
Okay. Any other opinions before we continue?
Yeah, the results can also vary dramatically from AI detector to AI detector. So it's not it's not an easy approach. I like what the other person said. I'm not sure who was talking about looking at when the image was created.
Yeah, that was me, David.
All right, let's continue.
Yes.
ImageDetector.com. As you can see, fake image detector indicates that it looks like a computer-generated or modified image. Artificial intelligence is changing our lives, and it's doing it rapidly. And it's no wonder that with the rise of AI image generation, that people would immediately think back to the past and question whether this technology was already around and being used to fabricate certain historical narratives. And the response here from Fake Image Detector suggests that maybe this construction photograph is actually an AI-generated digital image and has been used to fool us. For the narrative, they will inevitably take this as proof that these images are fake. But unfortunately for them, all it takes is a quick play around with other construction photographs from even earlier time periods to see that no, it doesn't classify a lot of these as fake, but as genuine and real. When I pointed this out to the person who left the comment on my feed, I didn't get a response. But this instance really does encapsulate the Tartarian advocates' relationship with old photographs. It is one of cherry picking, of highlighting what supports their ideas and ignoring what doesn't. And it reminded me of that video that myself and Wood and Nichols made. On the 25th of May, 2024, Stu Peters alongside Sean Hibbler will be releasing a movie promoting this conspiracy theory. It's called Old World Order.
As modern Americans, we've been spoon-fed this dumbed-down, cartoonish, simplified version of history. You see, according to their version of history, the rest of us were just a bunch of bumbling idiots. And so, of course, they had no choice but to seize control and force progress. But it's all a lie. It's all fake. It's all bullshit. And that's why the Stu Peters Network, together with Sean Hibbler, is releasing a new film titled Old World Order. We're going to pull the mask off of our nation's real history. For more on this, we're now joined by Sean Hibbler, the director of that film and CEO of Hibbler Productions. Sean, you've done a tremendous amount of work in this film, and only you can tell the audience what they can expect.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Stu. Yeah. Hello to your wonderful audience. Old World Order's kind of a 101 introduction to the PSYOP, really, because a lot of people don't know about it. They've heard about it, or they'll hear the word Tartaria.
Yes,
you know, that's just one piece of it. That's one empire. That's where Russia was. Okay, I mean that's where Russia is now. That's where Tartaria was. It's one of many empires that were hidden from us. The reason, like you said earlier, that they wanted to hide it is because, well, number one, they don't want people to know that we didn't build these buildings. And when you look at some of these construction photos of the past, and this will be in the film. Okay, for everyone doubting this topic, you're going to see what's going to happen here. There was a company called the Detroit Publishing Company. Okay. They were known for photoshopping. Back in the day, it was Victorian photography manipulation. Okay, they would actually go in a dark room, in the negative room back in the day, and they would etch and mask things. They would take a building and put it here. They would take a building out and remove it and make a white sky there. It's called vanilla sky. This is how they manipulated our history, through fake construction photos and through taking credit of, oh, we built these buildings. But when you look at the timeline, you'll notice that it's impossible.
Both Stu and Hibbler have a far larger audience than I do, and much more reach and influence. I think it's only right for others to have proper access to a different side of the argument, because this is not material that should be taken lightly. It's to do with the topic of historical erasure and the achievements of our ancestors. It is not something to play around with, but to treat with respect, dignity, and honesty. And so as a result, I'm re-uploading a director's cut of mine and Wood and Nichols' video that discusses the flaws inherent in arguing that all old construction photographs are fake. And please do note, this video was released almost 2 years ago, and it was a response to a video that the channel Mind Unveiled made. In re-uploading this here, I am not, in any way, shape, or form, intending to demean Mind Unveiled, nor do I encourage anyone else to do so in the comments as a result of this video. 1.5 years is a long time, and people change, they mature, they develop their understanding further, and they progress. What Mind Unveiled was arguing a year or so ago may not be what they believe today. In my opinion, they have...
Go ahead.
I feel I know Awar from Mind Unveiled's group. I'm not sure. I might be mistaken, but that's interesting. Interesting thought. I had a point, but I forgot about it.
Move beyond the Tartarian or Old World Order hypothesis and onto more.
What?
No, nothing. Let's proceed.
Interesting topics. Their videos on homunculus and the topic of alchemy are all very interesting and good fun. The reason I am re-uploading this is because it is an essential component to the discussion as to whether the Tartarian or Old World Order hypothesis is a legitimate one or not. So without further ado, I present to you Awar and Wood and Nichols' rebuttal of the all construction photographs are fake argument. Enjoy.
Okay, I remembered the point. I think it's a good moment to pause.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so he said, what was it again? Oh yeah, it's only fair to give like a counter argument. Like we don't like it's not like the counter argument is basically the stuff we're being spoon fed in school and on TV and from from social pressure and stuff like that. So yeah, that's a pretty interesting argument as well. I wonder what's in it for him. I mean, he says he's like an occult or conspiracy theory YouTuber. So yeah, I don't know what his issue is, to be honest.
Anybody else have a comment?
What do you mean? What's in it for him, except money?
Yeah, I guess. Okay, so then he's he's a shill basically who gets. And I mean, yeah, I mean, okay.
I mean, how can you leave out the mud of this whole topic? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, he hasn't. I did find it interesting though that he started talking about AI just the moment we finished talking about it. So that's pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, I think the way to go about it is, first of all, like let's not resort to like shills or grifters or anything like that. We just want to like, if there's any kind of a discrepancy, we just want to focus on that discrepancy and just tell our explain our opinions about it. And then if you have any thoughts that you want to address, I think it's good to kind of formulate based on the video that is being presented, and then just be like very not only concise but very how would I say, like clear with
exactly,
what the point is, rather than just kind of like run by the seat of our pants kind of deal. Do you understand what I mean here?
But yeah. But yeah. I mean,
I'd like to comment on this, what we see on the screen there. So
go ahead.
This is a good comment to make. Like, it's basically saying you can't just cherry pick data to support your position. You have to include also the data that is available that contradicts your position. Now, that's true, but what you really have to look at is, in my opinion, is that which data you can find is more probable to be true. And it is not only which is more, of which can you find more, because we have to assume it's all manipulated. And so in many cases, we can't really verify it ourselves. So it becomes really difficult to actually say, okay, this is data that is true, and this is data that is false. And so it's not just cherry picking what supports my argument or doesn't, but if you really look at it, you have to be authentic and have an honest conversation about which. I mean, if you're honest about this, you would actually have to only take things for your argument in support that you could at least get at least closer to being able to verify or correlate with other things. And by shortening this whole what I just laid out into, oh, you're just cherry picking your data, I think that is just a very dishonest statement to make, because he is probably very aware of the difficulty of verifying photos and historical instances, reports, documents, even even like architectural artifacts, ruins, and all that stuff. Like, he should be aware. He did like massive series LHFE and WOEF or whatever. What on earth happened, and lost history of flat Earth, and so he must be aware of these things. And so then opposing these fallacious arguments, he must be aware of how logical fallacies work as well. But then posing these like completely overshortened claims and just putting him out there in a very polemic way, it rubs me the wrong way, because I think he is probably a person very aware of how difficult it really is to find data that is actually likely to be true or not true, and to be able to say either way. So this, what we see on screen, is a vastly shortened statement that really comes down to a lot of probability and being able to say, okay, it's more likely that, or it's more likely that, or it's more likely true data point, or it's more likely untrue data point. But in reality, you can never say for sure, and that's why you have to collect a lot of data, right? And then everyone can say and come in and say, you're cherry picking. Well, that's what you could say, but before you even
isn't
start
all
cherry picking,
gathering?
you have to assess even the possibility of, is a data point more likely to be true or not? And it can never be 100% absolute. It's not a deterministic thing that we're attempting to do here.
The term data points already, and then data set obviously, but data points already implies that you are cherry picking. You can't gather data without cherry picking, because first of all, it has to be relevant to the question that you're trying to answer. So you're already discriminating. You're already cherry picking your data. It's impossible to do it otherwise.
Yeah, normally what you do is, for example, in a physical discussion where you're talking about physical numbers and stuff, what you do is, if you give any number a measurement, you always have to include the margin of error. So you always have to be to show like how accurately did you actually measure any number. So and how accurate was your method of measurement. So for every number that you give in any physical discussion or argument that is on paper, if you publish, then you always have to give the margin of error and your accuracy. And this is very helpful, and it's a good thing. And in these discussions that are not purely physical and purely numbers, conceptually you have to do the same thing. So you also always have to include, okay, I have this claim, or I found this position to be something that I can support with these data points or data sets, but they have these issues with them, and I can only make this claim up to this probability, something like that. I think that's a normal thing to do. And by completely dismissing that is possible or real, I don't know, it rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, I agree.
I'd just like to add that this whole Tartarian hypothesis, this is his creation. He's come up with the term, he's created a straw man, which he's then turning around and breaking down. And I've praised Ewar. I loved his early videos. I think that it was a nice synopsis of a lot of different threads of information that were out there. I've been looking into this stuff for the last 7 years, the whole Tartaria, mud floods, and star forts, and all this sort of thing. And so when he came out with those videos originally, I was like, wow, finally somebody's got a visually appealing, well-organized, interesting presentation of this information. And a lot of people really loved it. And then later on, he came across different bits of information that contradicted some of the things that he said. So he backtracked on some of those things, like when it came to the manufacture of bricks, for example. And I actually commented on his channel, and I praised him for being willing to do that, because a lot of people aren't. They're very quick to double down on whatever mistake they made because they don't want to be wrong in the eyes of their audience. And so he wasn't doing that. And he was trying to educate people about the importance of avoiding cherry picking, even though it is necessary for research to a degree. But this whole Tartarian hypothesis, this is his creation, because there was no Tartarian hypothesis. You have a whole bunch of different independent researchers, and I use researchers in quotes because a lot of people don't even know how to do proper research. They're just interested in things. They look into them. Then you have a lot of people making claims about those things that all these people are looking into. And then other people who've looked into this stuff even less start to run with those claims and present them as fact and present them as just, it's indisputable. This is that way. And so, I don't know, this whole Tartarian hypothesis stinks to me, because he's basically generalizing about a whole community of people that are individuals. There was no systematic, organized, published Tartarian hypothesis, and that is literally what he's tearing down through these videos. So that's my take on it. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else before we continue?
Yeah, I want to quickly tell to the audience, if you're wondering what the logical fallacies are, or a fallacious argument or incoherent argument, there's a site called yourlogicalfallacy.com, and there you can find them all named and explained with examples. And it's really helpful to get a sense of when someone is really bamboozling you with a bunch of words and when someone is coherently making a point and being honest, intellectually honest in the conversation.
Yep, I will share that in a bit. Alexander, you on mic there? Did you want to say something? Raphael, do you have any thoughts before we continue?
I think you guys laid it out nicely. Let's continue.
So Mind Unveiled just released a really good video on old world 19th century photo manipulation. And it's good for many reasons. The first reason is it's very comprehensive. So it gives a really good overview of all the photo manipulation techniques that they could use. So, he talks about the sort of ghosting phenomena where they trick people into thinking it was, spirits there in the photograph, to composite images and cropping and copying and pasting and removing people.
And I agree. I think it was a really good video. There were cases where he used Wikipedia, but then there was also cases where he was using books, the historical journals, which is the same thing that we do. So as a whole, I found it a really good video. Where he lost me is where he jumped to the conclusion that all photographs are fake.
Basically, all old world photos are fake.
And it kind of felt like it was straight out of the playbook of Ancient Aliens, where on that show, they're teaching you about these really interesting sites and you're getting into it. And then they come at you with their narrative where it was the ancient astronauts. And you're like, well, hold up now. Like, come on. Like, that was a really good presentation you were doing. The only other part that I would add in, I believe it was Legray. The research he did on Legray, where he showed that the sensitizing dyes actually could pick up skies back in the mid 19th century. I thought that was great because that was stuff I was unaware of. It certainly doesn't debunk the sensitizing dyes that leads to the vanilla sky narrative, but it adds to the story and shows that they could do that.
So I'm a bit confused in some ways because he does jump to these hasty generalizations and conclusions, which don't really match with the information he was presenting. But also as well is that I don't know whether because he stopped using the word Tartaria, and I don't know whether this is in support of that hypothesis or not, but what he's presented actually delivers like a tremendous blow to the Tartarian hypothesis. Whether it's a verbal debate, an essay or an entire book, an argument is very similar to a chess game. And just like in chess, when you make an argument, you have to anticipate and try and foresee all your opponents and opposition's moves in advance. And it's the same in argument. When you're making an argument or you're in a debate, you're always trying to see the potential pitfalls of that argument. Initially, that should be done from an honest perspective because you want the argument to be correct. But once you feel like you have a correct argument, you still have to see those pitfalls because you will be challenged. When I talk about the weak spots in an argument, I mean like the holes, the contradictory statements, the weak areas without enough evidence, moments of hypocrisy, tautology, fallacy, when you suppress evidence and present different kinds of evidence in support of your argument, selectivity, bias. These are your weak areas in argument. And this is why I really like Mind Unveiled's latest video, because it draws to the surface the Tartaria hypothesis' biggest weakness. And it kind of corners it into a lose-lose situation. And that's the photo manipulation. A big part of the hypothesis relies on the viewer or the recipient believing that all construction photographs are fake.
And when you look at some of these construction photos of the past, and this will be in the film, okay, for everyone doubting this topic, you're going to see what's going to happen here. There was a company called the Detroit Publishing Company. Okay. They were known for photoshopping. Back in the day, it was Victorian photography manipulation. Okay, they would actually go in the dark room, in the negative room back in the day, and they would etch and mask things. They would take a building and put it here. They would take a building out and remove it and make a white sky there. It's called vanilla sky. This is how they manipulated our history through fake construction photos and through taking credit of, oh, we built these buildings. But when you look at the timeline, you'll notice that it's impossible.
But what Mind Unveiled presents in this video is that photo manipulation occurred across all kinds of photographs. And what he shows is that they could remove people from photographs, remove them entirely. They could remove objects. He calls it vanilla sky. It's not. Vanilla sky is the oversensitizing dyes and the whitewashing due to the light. But the cropping of the sky and the cropping of certain buildings as well. He also shows instances where there's been artistic liberty. So, the producer of the photograph has etched onto the image and drawn things in there. But, as part of his conclusion, basically, and this is a direct quotation, all old world photos are fake.
Basically, all old world photos are fake.
And that's an extreme mindset because there's no evidence for that. There's evidence that there was manipulation in the same way there is today. One of his primary sources for the manipulated images is the Detroit Publishing Company. But the Detroit Publishing Company was a postcard company. And postcards by default are manipulated. And you see that here, especially with colorized photochrome. You see the way the edges are faded. You see that they emphasize good weather. And you see that they also remove objects that damage the composition of the photograph. So it's exactly the same as it is today with magazines, adverts, and whatnot. And we make people look more beautiful today, just as they did back then. He states that photo manipulation has been around since the camera's inception. Well, that immediately tells us that one, the Victorians were indeed advanced and not just horse and cart people. But most importantly, That 2, the practice of image manipulation was exactly the same back then as it is today, just not as good. But that doesn't mean that all photographs are fake. So I can go to a construction site, take a photograph, come home, put it into the computer, crop out the sky, change the colors, increase the contrast, turn it to black and white. And that's a manipulated photo. But the construction site was still real. It still existed. So his conclusions are off, but it's problematic for the Tartarian hypothesis because he's showing that they could remove people. Now, a big part of the Tartarian hypothesis relies on the notion that the cities in the 19th century, a lot of them were empty. Where are all the people? Now, me and you have explained that it's a long exposure time. But Mind Unveiled kind of rejects that long exposure time, and then says that could be manipulated as well. And that's fine. Then why is it not possible that they just removed all the people from these images, these cityscapes, to make it a better image? And it's the same with the instances of cropping and copying and pasting. He shows a building being what he considers cropped and copied and pasted into the shot. And I think he says,
We can also see the same thing in this V3 version, where the building with the white band-aid now has similar scratchings to the middle building from V2, as if they were trying to take it out to use for other photos. Notice that ornamental border on the top? So is this an added building? It's a copy and paste building.
But then in the Tartarian hypothesis, this makes it very problematic because you have cityscapes, San Francisco, for example, or Melbourne, shots of Melbourne and Sydney in Australia. And people say, whoa, these were really built up for the 19th century. You know, if we take Mind Unveiled's logic and reasoning here, then how do the advocates know that they didn't manipulate these photos to make the city seem larger and more populated through copy and pasting? You know, we don't subscribe to this idea, but you can't cherry pick with this one. If all old world photos are fake, then this also needs to be considered as fake. And then you might say, well, why would they want to fake images of what the city looked like? But Mind Unveiled kind of answers that without actually addressing it, is that if they were to fake photographs of cities and make them look a lot bigger and a lot more glorious than they were, especially in America and Australia, it would be propaganda and advertisements to draw in migration.
In terms of the World's Fairs, I feel like it also now throws all the information that's been presented there because those buildings don't exist for the most part anymore. There are some that are still standing today, but in the history books, they were built later, after the World's Fairs. Case in point with the Palace of Fine Arts in San Francisco. It's on the record as being built, the permanent one you see today, in the 1960s, construction in the 1970s. There's one in Chicago. I think it became known as the Field Museum. And that construction started in the 1930s. So all those old glorious photos that we've seen of the World's Fairs, those are now out the window because you've admitted that all photographs are fake. That includes those. So the Tartaria hypothesis just lost the World's Fairs too.
Yeah, and with the World's Fairs as well, when you look at them, they look amazing in those old photographs. But if they were that good at touching up images, and he shows that, he shows how people were made to look more beautiful than they were. Well, then why wouldn't you do that with a fair? Of course you would. And you also get photographs of the fairs illuminated at night, and you think, whoa, they had all this amazing light systems and electricity. Again, the photo manipulation has to be applied there. It has to be applied to everything. So what me and you would do, we said this in our photography video, is that every single photograph.
I think we can discuss this argument.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, yeah. Look, I obviously saying all old photographs are fake is an extreme argument. I completely agree there. And obviously, they're right to how do you say, to apply reductio ad absurdum, to take it to the absolute extreme. But I do think, come on, guys. I mean, we're not stupid. We can distinguish between AI art and human art. So at least we're doing pretty fine, I think, on that front. We can also distinguish between fake photos and real photos. In large part, obviously, it's not that. Obviously, depending on the quality of the manipulation, it might be harder to tell the difference. But I think in general, you can tell that the lights in the fairs and the buildings are actually real. And maybe the photos are later, that could be, but then the fair didn't exist, so that doesn't work either. So they must be real. Because I don't think you have a conception of like a night sky, or like a skyline with lights and stuff if you have never seen one. I don't think you can doctor that picture if it doesn't exist in real life. So yeah, that was my 2 cents.
Anybody else?
Well, just playing devil's advocate, of course, then someone could say, well, maybe the image was only created later and then backdated to make it look like it was the World's Fair, but actually it happened in 1960 and then only later released. But anyways, what I find curious in terms of arguing or not, it's not exactly the way I would approach it, is that within this argument here, it's taken, oh, because Mind Unveiled said basically all old world photographs are fake, then this means that this is necessarily correct. I mean, of course, I would hope somebody would have some semblance of a whatever photography machine, whatever it is back then, and just, you know, make random photos at least somewhere, somehow, and not every picture would be doctored. Yeah. So yeah. Anyways.
Yeah.
Go on, Mike.
Anybody else? All right, let's continue then.
Needs to be taken on a case-by-case basis. And it has to be evidence that there's traces of photo manipulation. And you could say, well, maybe they were that good that you can't even tell. And that's fine. But then you invalidate your entire argument and you invalidate your entire lens into the past, because then suddenly every single image is suspect. The cities of the past, the way they look, they don't look that way today. San Francisco does not look like it did in the 19th century. And it's the same with Sydney in Australia. It's the same all over the world.
Sorry, I think
so
I
if you're going
need
to make
to
a
add
case of
something
all
here too.
historical...
Because he just said, yeah, suddenly everything is suspect. I wanted to actually touch upon this because David mentioned that earlier too, because there is a difference there. Like the mainstream history buffs, let's say, or like the mainstream science types that are trying to debunk this stuff. Their assumption isn't that everything is fake, right? So their whole criteria for gathering knowledge is from a completely different assumption, namely that most knowledge that we have on history, on science, etc., is more or less accurate and more or less as we're being told it is. So if we're starting out on that big of a difference in terms of assumption, it's actually I'm actually starting to wonder if it's, you know, if there's anything that can be said either way from either side to actually come to an agreement, let's say, or to actually determine like what true knowledge is, let's say.
I want to weigh in on that. I think, I guess, Stellium also, and because this is really big deal. So in a cult, you have a dogma and nothing is suspect. In a method of inquiry, everything is suspect. You have skepticism. And the scientific method, as it is actually defined, it's not like trust the science, bro, but what does this mean? Everything is suspect. History and being a historian, you are automatically by default a revisionist. Everything is suspect. You know that maybe what your colleagues 10 years ago found is, you know, it has to be suspect to you because maybe you have more data now, or maybe you realize that new data you found was actually false. So you always have to be suspect in every direction. That's like the basic of inquiry and research. So if he is like implying here that taking a position of everything is suspect is somehow a bad thing, that is just very, very telling. It is just literally the complete antithesis to being an inquiring mind. It's basically being a dogmatist. So it is really problematic here.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, okay, so I think there are some things that we can take as facts or as assumptions. There are some things that you can't. I mean, we can, for example, I can't go out and just assume that I don't need to breathe anymore, for example, right? So I can't say that oxygen is suspect. I mean, I can say it, and there is a line of inquiry that allows me to do that. For example, there's definitely scientists who say that oxygen is actually killing you because it's how do you say, it's acidic, basically, you know, it's and stuff like that. But in general, we need it to survive. So we're going to go through our days, whether we like it or not, breathing normally, because that's what our body demands, right? So there are some things you can accept for facts, or you can accept as a
no,
as
there are no
assumptions to
things.
proceed from.
No, you can't.
Well, look, you can, but only in a practical sense, and only for a specific argument, you know. But
yeah,
at the
you always
same
have to
time,
put a disclaimer. You always have to put a disclaimer
exactly.
and limit to
exactly.
the domain where you can use it and say it's maybe only here locally or only that. But like the
Sure.
notion that skepticism is not a good thing is completely bankrupt. That is
Yeah, I
ridiculous.
completely agree. Yeah.
And I'd just like to reiterate that just because a few people say something doesn't mean that there's a consensus on the subject in a supposed community. And it certainly doesn't, imply that there's some sort of an organized hypothesis. And then I wanted to mention from something that someone said before about the AI images, I find that there's generally poor discernment in the truther community when it comes to the AI photos. I moderate a couple of different Facebook groups. There's so much crap that's being put out there by supposed truthers. And, so it's really, this is where boots on the ground, high definition footage is key when it comes to research. And obviously we can't do that when it comes to the past. So all of these photographs should be taken with a grain of salt. And, but what we do have are the remains of star forts on every continent to the tune of thousands. We have all of this old world architecture, which is still there and can be examined and looked at. And then we can examine the historical narratives that have been given to us about those. And I feel like that was what Ewar was doing in the beginning with his first videos. And then he came up with his Tartarian hypothesis. And now he's thrown out the entire baby with the bathwater. And they're picking these little nitpick points that are important because we all need to exercise discernment. We can't be just cherry picking and deciding which photograph we want to use to push our narrative. But they're picking at these small threads and trying to unravel a whole tapestry and think that they've done it when they haven't.
Couldn't have put it better myself.
Okay. Anybody else before we continue? All right, let's continue then.
Cool images, photographs are fake or have the potential to be fabricated. You invalidate all your lens into the past. You no longer have an argument. Empty Cities is gone, World's Fairs is gone. So what me and you do, we try and take each photograph on a case-by-case basis. And there are crop-ins, and there are composite images, and there are images that have been used for propaganda, and postcards that have had the sky blue because it's tourist propaganda. You're saying, come here. But you can't cherry pick and use postcards as evidence that all construction photographs are fake. You have to see it for what it is. Sky changes, retouching, cropping, removing people are not evidence that we didn't build these structures. No, but it is evidence that they could make their photos look better and locations look a lot more enticing and welcoming. So now you have no solid foundation to argue that the cities of the past were even glorious. They may not have looked this good or been so built up. So what Meinenwald has done is brilliant because he says,
and we should certainly be questioning any photos on the historical record and the level of retouching that has been done to these.
That also includes all the buildings that do not stand today, like the Singer building. Now you don't have that one anymore because even though there are construction photos of it, even though there are photos of it existing, it doesn't stand today. We don't have evidence of it. The only evidence you had of it was in photographs, and it was classified as a Tartarian building. According to this new presentation and research, that building no longer exists anymore. You don't have an argument that the Singer building was Tartarian. The photos that Meinenwald have shared are obviously manipulated or altered. Anyone can see that just by looking at them. Now, they do find cases where they're in archives and they're not mentioned that they are manipulated. And I wouldn't immediately go and say, well, that means that there's a mass conspiracy taking place here and all photos are faked and manipulated. But from the photos that we presented on construction sites, whether it be the canal photos, it's very possible there may have been retouching somewhere along the way for restoration purposes. But for the most part, there is no evidence of it. They are basic photos taken with the basic cameras for the time period. To conclude, every photograph we've shared is doctored because photo manipulation is possible, is equivalent to coming to the conclusion every vocal musician uses auto-tune because auto-tune exists.
Yep, I agree. It's worth outlining too that documentary photography is different from architecture photography, which would have been taken by firms to demo their work, and from photographs that have been formatted for postcards, magazines, newspapers. I mean, it's quite obvious that with images where the sky has been cropped, or certain obstructions like buildings have been cropped, they were going to be processed for a different format. Just like the Singer building here, the photo on the left is the original, and it's been processed into this postcard on the right. And it's got a different sky and whatnot. And we still practice this form of photo manipulation today for publication. And there is also such a thing as art. Many artists today still merge painting and photography. We practice all of this more today than we ever have done. And it would be very easy for a generation in 100 years' time to find all of this and use it to hypothesize that we didn't exist, and we're a historical fabrication. But that's not the case. Not everything is a lie and not everything is truth. And there's a reason that I never use photo manipulation to support my arguments in LHFE. because it's cherry picking. And cherry picking is hypocrisy. Mind and Val concludes,
we must use other methods to question the official narrative outside of photographs that were given to the libraries and archive collections through these corporate publishing companies.
And we actually agree. It is time for the Tartarian advocates to use methods outside of photography to question the narrative. You can't make photo manipulation your central argument because, like we've said, it undoes all of your arguments. You don't have a lens into the past. You need to go to different methods of debunking history, and especially construction. So there's a vast amount of available evidence that can be tested to demonstrate whether manual construction is possible or not. Steam machines still exist. You can go and test them out. You can build a Jim Pole crane or a Derrick crane out of wood and see if it can lift the load. And we do have evidence of people moving megalithic heavy stone manually. We have evidence we can carve stone. There's so much evidence out there that we can make bricks en masse. So that's where it needs to be debunked. You need to actually demonstrate that we can't do this stuff manually. And then you might have an argument. What I think he's done, he's put the Tartarian advocates into a very tricky position. You know, they try to use his examples of photo manipulation as supporting evidence that all construction photographs are fake. Then, like we discussed, they lose major components to their hypothesis because you can't arbitrarily just cherry pick to suit your argument. And just to go back to when you showed Legray, I noticed it said down the bottom that he was buddies with Alexandre Dumas. He wrote a famous novel, The Count of Monte Cristo. Well, that's another area the advocates can attempt to debunk all the writers, because they wrote both fiction and social commentary. The world is captured very well in their texts. So as a starting point, that would be Dickens, the Brontes, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, Victor Hugo, William Faulkner, Herman Melville. And then there is the archival newspaper documents in the millions, the documentation on construction. It's interesting that Mind Unveiled uses an old book on photo manipulation to support his argument. Why would a book like that be any more historically valid than this document outlining construction practices? So that's another area to turn to. So this is the royal fork. And this applies to argument. The royal fork is when the opponent's king is checked, while their queen is also simultaneously marked. And the opponent is forced to move their king because they're checked, but in doing so, they forfeit their queen. And this is what Mind Unveiled has just done to the Tartarian hypothesis with this photo manipulation video. It's a lose-lose situation, because by using photo manipulation to support an argument that all construction photographs are fake, you invalidate all historical photographs and lose all central components that make up your hypothesis. You lose everything. So this is what he's done. He's put you into this. You know, the king is the hypothesis and the queen is photo manipulation. And they both can't exist here. So if you're going to move that over to keep the hypothesis going, then photo manipulation has to go. It just doesn't work.
All right.
Go ahead.
I mean, he has a point. I see where he's coming from. As I said before, I don't think anyone honestly believes that all photos are manipulated, literally. And obviously, we are looking at them on a case-by-case basis, because that's generally what these Tartaria channels do. They just present these photos and then they have some commentary. And I don't know how active their chats are, if anyone is pointing them at their mistakes. If they have any glaring ones, let's say. I don't think it happens very often, to be very honest. But I mean, still, you can't say that they're not. Because again, if you say you're going to analyze those photos on a case-by-case basis, then you're actually cherry picking, and that's what you have to do in that situation. So it's very, I mean, he has a point, but it's a circular argument, and we can argue the same thing from the other perspective. That's what I think.
Anybody can answer this question by Mark Bloom. He says, are AWAR and Wood and Nichols still of the mind that history is a lie agreed upon, and have they just set aside Tartaria mud flood?
Yeah, I think that should be asked
so, yeah.
to them, because how can we know what mind they are?
Well, I think it's accurate to say that that's basically what they've done, because AWAR officially, I guess he said so in his video, still posts videos about conspiracy stuff. But I don't know how Wood and Nickel. I don't know what Wood and Nickel's deal is. So, and I actually suspect that he probably talked him into this.
All right, so I have a couple questions. So, like, basically regarding photograph, like one of the concerns is about artificial intelligence or Photoshops, right? So, I guess this question has been kind of answered before, but I guess for clarity, what is the best way to come to some consensus or understanding that a Photoshop has been used for these old photographs, because that would be a part of the discernment of, you know, can we accept it or not at face value, right?
Well, yeah, usually it's those those sloppy cutouts, let's say. So usually you can see it that way, or if like a part of a building is missing, like in the sky or whatever, things like that. Now, the more the recent the photographs become, the harder it is to tell, I think. Although photoshopping, modern day photoshopping, I think you can still generally tell when it's being applied. But again, I'm speaking from personal experience, so I have some experience in art, so I think I have a better discernment than most people. But I think it's generally, yeah. I think that there are cues that you can look out for. I think you could probably look it up too, like what those cues could be.
Okay. Another question I have is that some people were saying that these old photo or cameras, you know, they weren't able to capture movement very well, and that's maybe part of the reason why a lot of these photographs with just these buildings, is that plausible? Does it seem accurate that because the camera was only capturing, you know, standing objects like buildings, but, you know, people are moving around, I would think that there would be like streaks of something, you know,
Yeah.
in the photo, because if there are a lot of people out in the streets and stuff, you would still pick up something, would you not?
You would, and there are some pictures where those are visible, so it's a factor. You can see it in some pictures, but not all of them. And obviously, he has a point too. There could be pictures where the people are just removed, you know. So he has a point there, because that would be possible too, if you have the tools to manipulate those pictures. But yeah, so I'm not sure if. Look, the thing is, I'm not sure if empty cities are an important argument. If we're talking about cities that are covered in mud and we have like a bunch of architecture, but no, how do you call it? No infrastructure, no roads, you know. And I think David has already mentioned that argument a few times. So
yeah, I wanted to add here, his point is obviously correct when he says every picture has to be looked at in a case-by-case basis. That's just though a ridiculous argument to make, because it's so obviously it's a truism. Yeah, like if you look at an individual photo, something you can do is you look at other photos of the same thing being shown, and then you try to, you know, apply some common sense and maybe, you know, napkin statistic analysis, or, you know, like to just look like, okay, what appears more? When were these photos made? Are they paintings of these things? Are they photos?
I think the word was blanket.
Yeah, do they show like different ground levels? For example, we've seen that a lot, where there are paintings of buildings that have ground level at vastly different levels and stuff like that. So, but then his argument being like, oh, you know, this guy says all photos are fake, and I will just attack that argument. That's like pretty much a straw man. Okay, if that guy said that, cool, right? But then he kind of generalizes that to the whole community, and it just is again a straw man argument. So
I'd like to point out something additional, not exactly in terms of the arguments, but I guess realized that now there is a channel in German or from Switzerland called Knopfloch. And even years back, a friend of mine, because was into the topic, was like, oh, check it out, it's really cool. And apparently, and probably David, you will know this is simply the original EWAR series of Lost History of Flat Earth translated to German. I don't know how much actually has been changed, but I just checked it again right now, and it's amazing. This guy managed to grab 500,000 views almost on the first 13 minutes, episode 1, and he gives no attribution whatsoever to the original creator. I'm impressed by the audacity. And just since we're on the topic, there is a similar case from last year. someone came out in Germany with a book called The Phoenix Hypothesis, and this was basically 90% copy paste with some extra unrelated stuff taken from Archaics. And actually managed to tour quite a few podcasts, and nobody even spoke to it. I even spoke with a friend, with Martin, who's also sometimes at conferences and giving presentations in German. And sometimes do shows with him on Europa with Andreas. He met him, said, yeah, interesting guy, and so on. Even he didn't know that this author, just copied 80%. And I'm like, wow, even just with a language barrier, even today, with like the American colony, German speaking areas, or Germany and America, it's enough that many people won't even realize you can take the full credit, authority and the cloud for that. And most people won't ever realize that, you only maybe did a translation or a voiceover, but yeah, amazing.
Yeah, anybody else? Let me take a look at this comment that I highlighted. I've been a tradesman my whole life, and I just don't get the denial of human accomplishments and what's possible. Is there no other tradesman in here? The only mystery is monolithic structures. This is not to pick on NFT, Music for Truth, and it's just a kind of a general concern. People might have, because that's one of the arguments that's been made. I've heard people say in other channels about we have, one of the main arguments they say is a straw man is we only had horses back then, and we couldn't have possibly built these giant structures, etc. And then people are like, no, we could do it. This is one of the discussions that we had last time when I had Rose up here, and Raphael, you were up here with us. And she was basically saying hey, we had trains back then, we had cranes, and we had, various, ways to build it. And, people are quite talented and very, good at whatever they do. So, we don't need this magical thing to build all this stuff. We can just do it with our hands and stuff. What do you guys think about that?
So I'll start briefly. There's nothing that has to be magical about it. And also, I'm not sure if for any of the argument it is a requirement to say, oh, we can't build it anymore. Maybe we can build many of the things, but still it remains, where's all the mud coming from, and why did virtually all, apparently, or whatever, relevant cities burn down around 1900? So I don't know.
And not just that, because there's reason to suspect these people, there's reason to suspect that our ancestors had more advanced technology than we're being led to believe. And if that's not a human accomplishment, then I don't know, I don't know what is, because I don't think the argument has to be that they have to be giants. Obviously, there are giant doors as well, so that's part of it. I think there were definitely giants walking around amongst us. But that's not, that's not to say that human accomplishment isn't a thing.
Yeah, two more brief things about that. So one, which maybe deliberately was not mentioned in this criticism video, and the criticism was, I guess, also related to Old World Order. And interestingly enough, they didn't show that. They showed these few clips in Old World Order, which I don't know if they could be verified more. They're really low resolution, but where you even see someone with this hoverboard, these kind of videos, and some other interesting contraptions, where at least you would say, oh, I haven't seen this type of design for a long time, or it's something where you would be like, well, it looks like anti-gravity. God knows, right? But they deliberately left that out. And with the example I always like to give, just because I believe on a fundamental level it is somewhat ridiculous. I attended this high school, supposedly Jesuit high school. I always recount the story, Akademisches Gymnasium Wien, and this was supposedly built in 2 years in 1856 or something like this, by I think Friedrich von Schmidt, and he built so many things, and also this building in only 2 years, if you trust the plaquette that's on front, right? And now imagine me, not particularly strong or bulky, and I'm maybe 10, 11 years old. I approach this door, and I literally have to apply my whole body weight to be able to get the door to move. And supposedly this building was newly built in 1860, because the school as an institution already existed for 200-300 years. supposedly, and this building was only recently put there as a school. Yeah, and then I'm like, okay, well, definitely, just what I want to say, definitely not. It's not a door made for a child. And then, of course, yeah, someone who would be, I guess, 1.5 times size of a regular human could easily enter as well, if not even taller. So, yeah, just give me a good reason why anyone would do that. And they always come only with the explanation, oh, it's because of grandeur or whatever. And I'm like, well, yeah, maybe, but that's a little low on the practicality side in the end, even if I have lots of resources.
Yeah, I want to chime in real quick. Like, if you were to set out and find the weakest point to attack this whole Tartaria emerging story, history, whatever inquiry, you would literally end up with AI images. And if you were to look at what's the hardest to attack, you would probably not go for giant bones, big doors, architecture for supposedly large people and very large people, buried lower halves of buildings, and lots of mud. So these are the things that need to be explained and debunked if anyone wants to make the whole idea of Tartaria not be credible. To completely destroy Tartaria as a topic of inquiry, just destroy these. And then no one will care about it anymore. The reason why it is popular to look into is because these have not been properly coherently explained, and that is why the mystery supposedly still remains and why people are interested in figuring it out. It's just because it is not easy to explain, and you just go deeper into rabbit holes. If it was so easy, then these people wouldn't go for some AI photos and missing skies and missing people, but they would go for the actual, hard points of the architecture, the walls that hold
somebody
it all
would
together.
say that
But
that's strawmanning. Right.
Yeah, it's just it's a strawmanning. Go for the weak point, and then you try to hit the weak point, but it doesn't matter one thing. It doesn't change. Yeah. It doesn't change anything about the whole field of inquiry if there was like skies or no skies or people in the city or not. You still end up with a lot of huge people architecture, mud flood, buried lower buildings, and giant bones and all that stuff.
I think this is a legitimate question. Are the corridors as large as the doorways and the doorways inside the as large as the external entrances? So basically, I think the point is that if these buildings were, let's say, created for giants in the past, then everything else should be made for giants as well. And also, on top of that, I would say that, yes, there are photographic evidences of like giant books, giant boots, punt guns, you name it, everything giant. And somebody can argue, well, maybe, I'm just playing a devil's advocate here, somebody created that back in the past, and they injected into our society and in the museums to make us think that giants existed. I mean, like, so what do you guys how would you guys respond to those type of allegations or questions?
You could say the same thing about the Tartarian maps. And I think, the problem here with the whole Tartarian hypothesis is it's not really about Tartaria. We are talking about the old world, and Tartaria became a placeholder term for what people were uncovering as they started to dig into history, and they started to notice that there are these architectural anomalies around the world, and that the scale is so massive. There's underground tunnels, there's pyramids on every continent, it just goes on. And people started calling that Tartaria because it was a great term for, because we had all these maps that we were looking at that obviously could also have been faked, like just about everything else nowadays. And so it was an easy term, but of course people start to make claims about it and say that Tartaria was across the whole world. Well, no. If there was some grand worldwide civilization, Tartaria was a part of it, but it wasn't all called Tartaria. So right away, it comes under fire, and then there's a whole bunch of people that start to attack it who haven't even looked into the subject because they think, oh, this is dumb, and they find a little shred of information that contradicts what some people are unjustly claiming, and then it spirals from there. I think you know, again, it gets back to this supposed Tartarian hypothesis. The real point is that people are finding a lot of different things all over that just don't make sense. And when it comes to what Ewar and Wooden Nichols have done in their more recent videos, to me, it feels like it's a lot less about encouraging people to engage in higher quality research and avoid the common pitfalls and be careful about their use of language and when they use these universal terms like all and every, and rather that it's more about steering people away from the subject matter. And that you know, is something that bugs me with the whole thing, because again, it's throwing the whole subject under the bus and claiming, no, we could have done all these things. Well, the people who claim that we couldn't have possibly done this, they're not necessarily thinking it all through, and they don't maybe realize how ingenious we were and what we were capable of doing 100 or 200 or 300 years ago. But to say that it's just like, oh, you know, no way we possibly could have done this, I think that's an error. And then that's an error that gets echoed out into the community. And then people think that that's, you know, the truth. So, yeah. And then when it comes to Ewar, it's like, I'm always skeptical of these people that develop a following and then they have these opinions and they don't show their faces. They're not willing to put their face to their research. And I'm skeptical of that over and over again. It feels like it was a bait and switch with the lost history of flat Earth and then all this Tartarian information. And maybe the whole goal from the beginning, as someone else in the chat suggested, was to throw the whole idea under the bus. I don't know. I'd like to think that wasn't the case. I've liked his work. I've commented many times with positive things on his channel. Someone else in the chat mentioned Foucault's Pendulum, which is a book by Umberto Eco, which I read years ago. If anyone's read it, spoiler alert, I'm gonna say some things about the end of the book. I thought it was an incredibly well-written book. It was all about conspiracies and worldwide conspiracy theories and secret societies and how they're all posturing to try and gain control and get this important information. And at the very end, the basic reveal is that nobody has a clue about what's going on. They all think they've got the pieces of the puzzle, and it was just an incredibly disappointing ending. But when I read that book, I felt like the entire point of the book was to try and make it look like the whole conspiracy theory investigation is just a pointless endeavor, and that there is no organized control from on high, and it's all just a bunch of people posturing for control. And,
exactly.
And I think that was the whole point of the book, was to inject that idea into the mainstream consciousness and to give people something. And of course, what's it called? Foucault's Pendulum, which all the people in this community know is a total, joke when it comes to, supposedly proving the motion of the Earth.
Yep, absolutely.
There's
I think
one
most everybody
thing that
here
the
is.
book, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, there's one thing that the book does say outside of this, or well, not exactly outside, but like that is useful in this type of research, which is basically like how like the Gestalt, or the you could say the egregore, like that term, how that basically works, how it develops, because the whole premise of the book is that they actually invented a conspiracy theory that became real because people started believing in it. And there is an aspect of truth to that aspect of the story of Foucault's Pendulum. So I thought that'd be good to point out, because I don't think it's just a disappointment. There's definitely something to be said for what he's trying to illustrate, but at the same time, you can definitely tell that he's been he's writing the book from an agenda, and that's not the only case where he does that, because like the Name of the Rose is the same story, because it's just intended to ridicule the church and things like that, and on a very simple level. Obviously, there are legitimate arguments to be made there, but the way it's done just kind of feels ham-fisted.
I agree with you about the egregore concept. Whether or not it actually creates an actual entity that gains power doesn't really matter. The fact is that it becomes an entity in the minds of people. So yeah, the more attention is focused on a particular subject, whether it's true or false, the more power and momentum it gets. So definitely.
Yeah, exactly. So but I also agree that there's something fishy about people not putting the faces to it, but you can also have the other extreme. So you can have people who know how to manipulate their face to present themselves in such a way that they're basically perceived as being flawless, and things like that. And obviously, like in a thing, in YouTube is basically showbiz at this point. So that's a very important aspect in getting views. Having a good presentation, making concise videos and things like that about specific topics that people might be interested in and stuff like that. And the whole algorithm is designed basically to find you an audience as well. So the fact that but you're right in saying that the fact that they're not showing their face is probably suspect in this situation. There was one last thing I wanted to propose, just for the heck of it. Like, I would love to see a debate between AWAR and Ancient Historia. Because, like, for me, this Ancient Historia is like the shining example of like how Tartaria research should probably be
Go
done.
ahead and contact them, Alexander, and then you can host it.
I would love to see
love
that debate. Absolutely.
Yeah, that would be very interesting.
And I agree. There's no shortage of the cult of personality. So just because somebody shows their face doesn't mean they're sharing truth.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to touch on
Right.
that. So you can put some beautiful image and create your whole branding. You just hire 2-3 people on Fiverr to create your whole branding thing, or do it yourself. Doesn't mean you're not suspect. It just means you have some skills in advertising.
Sure.
Or you can have some anonymous image.
It doesn't
like
mean you are
myself.
suspect either. Yeah.
Doesn't mean you're suspect or you're not suspect. Doesn't mean anything. Only
Okay.
thing what counts is how you act, how you behave with the people around you, with your audience, how consistent you are, if you can admit errors, if you can learn new things from new content. If I see someone who's talking the same crap for 10+ years, then he is suspect. And that's just it. Because how can you be in a truther community supposedly about inquiring new things and talk the same bullshit crap for 10+ years? There's people out there who are like that. And it just takes you 5 seconds to think about it to realize they're just full of shit. That's what we call gatekeepers. The reason why it's not suspect to not show your face is because we live in an environment in most countries in a society where if you say the wrong word, they knock on your door and just drag you to prison. That's just very simple. And not wanting to deal with that is not suspect. That's on my end. Just like, that's smart.
I agree. I agree. It's definitely
being
smart.
effective in what you do. So why would you jeopardize that by supposedly showing your face? If anything, it can be said that if you do show your face and you never have any problems, and you talk the same crap for 10 years, then you're very suspect, because it just means you have a well-managed character in the public. You're probably well-funded, you never get censored, and you never advance on your topics.
Yeah. Before anybody else continues, Raphael, if you're there, can you tell us a little bit more about the photo that you were sharing here?
Yeah, so just that, this is the little bit of ground research I can do myself. Actually, I researched this place for 8 years because I went to school there, and just, I don't know, there can be all kinds of simple explanations. I don't need, magical giants to build this or whatever. I just want to point out, would you really build a school like this? I just kind of, went a bit down for relation in terms of maybe how tall I could have been back then, or a regular 10-year-old could be. Yeah, just something to consider. And for me, it was just amazing every day to walk in and out of this building. Inside, it's really beautiful with these, I think, even red columns, and very nice art everywhere. Yeah, really majestic looking building. And then even just here, the idea, why are all of these buildings either schools, banks, or government institutions? all of that.
Post offices.
So, exactly, post offices.
For some reason, post offices just always have the most magnificent architecture that you can imagine.
And here, if we would follow through logically, of course, it's post offices. I mean, the whole post union is a thing into itself. But of course, I mean, being able to control who can send what, where, who gets delivered or not. I mean, this is the early internet. So of course, this would be, gets the best building because it's the most important thing for a control structure, I would say. That's how I would explain it.
Guess why postcards are all manipulated? Guess why postcards are all propaganda?
You need $1 billion building to go buy your 25-cent stamp. Come on.
Yeah. So if we there's a couple more videos to kind of look at. There's one by Bushwhacking that is, and then the other one is a little bit longer. And then also another one that I think Raphael shared was actually of the panel with David Weiss, Alex Jones, and somebody Savage, Eddie Bravo. Eddie Bravo was there. So we can take a look at any one of those videos if you guys want. How do you guys feel? Which direction do you guys want to go?
There was a good video. I just want to plug it. There's a good video. It's an Italian channel that had Philip Druzhinin on. He's a Russian guy who was the one who coined the term mud flood. And they were going through some of the points of the EWAR video, and they were talking a lot about photography, and there were some very good points in that video as well. So I'll post it.
You're welcome to share that. Yeah, put that in the chat or somewhere. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's all I wanted to say. I was just,
yeah,
I can encourage people to take a look at that, because there was some very good research done there, and they had a lot to say about the claims that EWAR and Woody have been making.
Anybody else? Raphael, what do you think? Shall we watch another Wooded Nichols video, or there's that Bushwhacking video, but that's a little bit longer. It's about 50 minutes. I don't know how long this David Weiss and Alex Jones video is actually, but
I think the one I shared, I actually showed it yesterday also. I mean, I think it's fun to watch. It's like the backstage. It's like maybe 5 minutes. It's something shorter. It's nice to watch. It's what Dave Weiss recorded backstage.
Is this the video that and then I put it on the timestamp. I think that that you put on there. So if it's only 5-10 minutes, then let's watch it.
Exactly. It's mainly now you can even maybe go forward a little bit. You can do that even with the keyboard, then it's more exact. So just a few more, like 1 minute or something, exactly. Yeah. And because they still talk, and then the video starts. So you can let them talk maybe now. Let's see.
I sent you a message on Facebook Messenger too. I said maybe you can do it through Facebook.
Yeah, it's a huge file I'm uploading, but it's almost done. We're getting fucked with. I always think we're getting fucked with online. It's like the simplest tasks of showing a video to you suddenly becomes really impossible at the moment you really want to do it. But the video I'm sending over to you is almost done. It's gonna be in your email, and then I've got another one too with him in the green room, talking to Daria, who's like Alex Jones' producer. Daria's flat. And most of the people in that studio down there in Austin are flat. So you've got this wild fucking barrel man of a fucking individual, Alex Jones, wandering around, farting out of his mouth all day long. He won't talk about flat earth. He won't do all that stuff. But I think he kind of knows it, and he kind of has to suck up to it, because like they had the biggest viewership in the last couple of days that they've ever had. So it was like a huge deal. Nicole's back here talking to NDB on another podcast. We're all talking about the same thing, which is this InfoWars thing that happened. And it's kind of a big deal. Like it went, right now there's just one little spot. I saw 60,000 views just on a little Rumble channel. And Daria was talking to Weiss and saying, hey, this is a big deal. I think Alex has to talk about it, whether he likes it or not, whether his board members like to talk about it or not. They have to talk about it now. There's no question about it. So and I have I'm going to send, okay, so this is sending along to you. I haven't even seen this video. I'm sending you something from in between takes when they were live. So like, I have no idea what this is, but like, I think you're a perfect, like, this is a perfect broadcast to like look at it. So, okay. So it's sending, you'll get it in a second. And I'm just, to get an idea of what this damn thing's actually happening is, it's like, there's a bunch of people playing a bunch of roles.
Yeah.
And they're playing roles that are fucking weird. And you're like, what the fuck are you? You know, like if you look at Alex Jones doing, I've watched this interview now 7 times. He's got Duper's Delight the entire stretch of the interview. You know, so I'm like, are you okay? Okay, so you're on Flat Earth or you're not on Flat Earth. He's not showing his cards at all. He's just being kind of a tubalard with a farty face. You know, so you got to walk with that. And you got Weiss and you got fucking Eddie Bravo. They're triangulating him to get the solution that they want. And Darius backstage telling both of them, look, this is how you do it. He's a crazy person, but you got to go at him and go at him in the right way so that he doesn't feel like he's threatened because he's a wild animal. And I'm still going through this right now. I'm still going through this shit. You know, I'm like, wow, that just happened. And according to Daria, you know, the producer said, like, we had no choice. We had to cover the subject. We had to cover it. And the reaches went through the roof. So there you go. You know, you should have a video here in a minute.
Yeah, I do. I got it.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why it wouldn't let me share. I think the internet hates us. But oh, not hate. It's not hate. It's, okay, the internet doesn't enjoy us. Okay, I got you. That's Nicole.
The internet sucks.
The internet is, you know, the internet's just like against us or whatever. I don't know what this video is. I haven't even watched it yet. Weiss sent it to me, so like, take a shot at it.
Let me. Oh, I'm gonna have to cut my thing here. Okay, so let me present. I'm gonna share a screen. Let's see. Hopefully, it'll play for this. I downloaded it too, so let's see what happens.
Let's see what happens.
If you go around, you end up in the set. No fucking pilot goes around the world like that. They go boom, and they go boom, and they go boom, and they go boom.
I knew this was gonna be Flat Earth. Fine. Good. I love how you go on an MMA show. You'll do that. You just me. It's all Flat Earth. But fine.
I've been on your show many times and didn't do Flat Earth. I've been on your show many times.
I don't care.
I've done many shows, no Flat Earth. But you're doing a great job because no one's gonna say you're Flat Earth. Because you're denying it. We're arguing. Keep doing that. So you're safe. You're safe. Just keep doing it.
Navigation and airships. Okay, let's talk about it.
In the Old World Order, the trailer. Oh, you gotta watch.
I've seen
gonna
it.
Change the world.
You've seen it.
The Old World Order, dude. You're gonna trip, dog. There's all the fake news you talk about, Alex. It's all fake news. It's not just half of it. It's all fake news. All of it.
That's pretty funny.
No, this is off camera. They're not on the air during.
I've got one more to send you too, and I'm gonna do it via email.
Cool. We don't need to continue.
This is the shit you want to see because like this is the shit that happens backstage, and like Weiss.
Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to point out this is just a cross-reference with Old World Order, and I just found it interesting that it just got released and they managed to get it up to there. Dave Weiss was on, and they made Alex show the trailer. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out. And interesting, I think I like what Eddie Bravo said to Alex, was kind of like, look, Alex, you talk about all these conspiracies, think a little bit bigger. I just thought it was
yeah.
And I can really recommend this discussion because it's not only informative or interesting, but also really entertaining. And actually, I think a good thing, because even if, of course, many people will fall for whatever BS and many people will make up a name and then spew lies, but more people overall will be interested. And I still have maybe the naive faith that those that really want to know, they will know, and there will be more and more people, joining the research, making up their own minds. And I think that's really a net positive. And if it's true that this had so high reach, then that's amazing, of course, for all these topics we're talking about. For some people to filter through to arrive at the, how should I say, research front lines.
Was David Weiss filming in secret here? I don't understand what's going on.
Basically, yes. I mean, secret.
Yeah, it looks like
the
that
break.
way. Is there any more to this video? Do we need to watch a little bit more?
No. I think that's the main point I wanted to show.
Okay.
Just because I found it was hilarious what they say about each other and how they interact. Because when I was seeing it, this is just to relate to Old World Order. Alex even said, "Oh, so now schizophrenics are making movies." Yeah. So he was like, in a way, completely against it. But then when you see this, it's also very possible that, well, all the world is a stage, what to say, even if you want to deliver information.
All right.
Architects. That's
yeah.
an interesting video.
Let's take a look at this one. Unless anybody has anything more they want to add, and then we can continue on with this watch party.
So like But if you are to try to make in 60 minutes, and you're going to take like a few minutes of Longo and Leapgit and Gibbs, I mean, these are guys that are known to be able to really just be able to talk. So to be able to get
Smith at the bottom, he is a 25-year architect, man. And in my opinion, he's a whistleblower, and that's funny to people, I'm sure. But man, he's been an architect for so long that he knows what's going on, in my opinion. And he said a lot of stuff in this film. And
as you've heard from Sean Hebler himself, Matthew Smith, a 25-year veteran in architecture, has been described as a whistleblower. Matthew Smith, founder and principal of Dream Design Build, has been designing custom homes since 2005. With an extensive background in residential architecture and construction, he is an industry leader in roundhouse design. Visit Smiling Woods Yurts for prefabricated wood and yurt kit options. All of our complete round home kits include the shell components, roof, walls, siding, for a round structure, built with the same principles as traditional stick-built homes. From first glance, these prefabricated wooden yurt kits look like the type of structures found on a hippie commune. But make no mistake, Wood & Nichols has zero experience in the field of construction. Matthew's YouTube page, Marvelous Old World, focuses on exploring the lost architecture of the Old World in America. In this presentation, Wood & Nichols will be reviewing the first 5 minutes of Old World Seattle edited version.
When I have these conversations with people, what's often, the rejoinder that's often put on the table as well, they knew how to build things back then. And yes, they did know how to build things back then. Yeah, there was master craftsmen that were coming from Europe as immigrants. I get that. But you got to have enough of them, and you got to have enough resources to work with, and you got to have enough time. This is in 1882. Why so big?
Here Matthew asks, why so big? Referring to a 3-story building in 1882. Compared to a Smiling Woods yurt house, yes, this structure is pretty big. As Matthew previously points out, the population of Seattle in 1880 is recorded at 3,500. In 1890, the population spikes to 42,837. According to Mainstream Lies, people were moving from east to west. So let's look further east and see if we can spot a correlation in regards to population growth. The population of Kansas City, Missouri in 1880 is 55,785. Indianapolis's 1880 population at 75,056. Columbus, Ohio is at 51,647 and also sees a spike in 1890, with a population of 88,150. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania at 156,381 in 1881, and Boston at 362,839. Welcome to Wonderopolis, a place where natural curiosity and imagination lead to exploration and discovery in learners of all ages. Wonder of the day number 74, what is city planning? Have you ever wondered, what is city planning? What factors should be considered when planning a city? Why do homes tend to be clustered in one area while businesses are in another? There is evidence of urban planning and design communities dating back to Mesopotamia and Egyptian civilizations in the 3rd millennium BCE. The idea of a planned out urban area evolved as different civilizations adopted it. Let's pretend for a moment our ancestors here in Western society actually built stuff, a crazy concept that was widely accepted throughout history until 2020. The Wonderopolis Children's website asks us to pretend we ourselves are a city planner and exercise our critical thinking skills. Rather than using the example the website provides, let's focus on Matthew's inquiry of why so big?
Why so big? I just have to ask this question again and again.
Applying the earlier information pertaining to the growing Eastern American cities of that time period, one could rationally conclude Seattle's city planners knew the population was coming. But how did you reach that conclusion, Wood & Nichols? Because they were planning a city, and the trajectory of the cities to the east provided evidence of consistent growth.
How are these being heated? It gets cold here.
Here, Matthew demonstrates the oldest trick in the Tartarian playbook, by asking questions without presenting the answer to create mystery. Fireplaces and furnaces, that's how buildings were heated in the 1880s. So to recap, Sean Hebler has described Matthew as an architect whistleblower who does not know how buildings were heated in the 19th century, while a simple online search quickly yields an answer.
I hope I don't sound like a broken record, but I think a lot of these points bear repeating. This is ornate craftsmanship, broken arches. I mean, columns, capitals, bases, everywhere. The detail on this building is exquisite. The amount of time it would have taken to do this, the amount of resources that it would have taken to do this, the amount of labor power, and the architecture is just magnificent.
The Yesler Leary building had a cast iron facade, a material that allowed the mass production of highly ornamented, stamped parts, but one that had a low melting point, making it vulnerable to fires. As Matthew states, the Yesler Leary building would be lost to the Great Seattle Fire of 1889. In the 1840s, the cheapness and malleability of cast iron led James Bogardus of New York City to develop the idea of buildings using cast iron for complete decorative facades, which were far cheaper than traditional carved stone, but could be painted to give the appearance of stone. Applying critical thinking to Matthew the whistleblowing architect, as a 25-year veteran in architecture, cast iron facading should be a part of one's vocabulary, yet is absent from the conversation in Matthew Smith's photo review of the Yesler Leary building. Cast iron architecture was a popular type of building design, used throughout the world in the mid-1800s. Its popularity was due in part to its efficiency and cost-effectiveness. A regal exterior facade could be mass-produced inexpensively with cast iron. Entire structures could be prefabricated and shipped around the world as portable iron houses. Prefabricated, where have we heard this term before? Ah yes, from Matthew Smith's website, where he sells prefabricated round yurt houses.
Back in the early 18th century, Abraham Darby, an Englishman, developed an iron that could be melted and poured into
So how did all those prefabricated cast iron houses burn down again?
This is fucking retarded.
They were vulnerable to fire, of course.
Well, yeah. Well, I guess you can melt them though if you burn them, hard enough.
I'll be right back. I have to drink a gallon of beer to keep up here.
Yeah, good. We can proceed, I think.
Reusable molds. Somewhere along the line, someone decided if this material could be poured into molds, all kinds of things could be done with it. In fact, these relatively inexpensive casts could be shipped and used on buildings far quicker and cheaper than carving stone, which is what they had done before. And since those molds were reusable, you could replicate the same piece many, many times over. Eventually, catalogs of these components were available from which a designer or builder could order all the parts necessary for an entire building exterior. All these factors came together to make cast iron building facades not only feasible, but advantageous and economical as well. Various bits and pieces of buildings done with cast iron, these window crowns, the cornices, but most commonly, if you've been in downtown situations, you've seen these facade components used very effectively. And then some buildings had very ornate facades that went all the way up. The entire facade was often done with the cast iron. Precast concrete enjoyed a significant reign as king of the preformed building component.
But I know you critical thinking online gumshoes will ask, how are these prefabricated cast iron facades shipped by horse and buggy? You'll want to start by researching the Union Pacific Railroad Acts of 1862. Seattle would see its first railway system begin construction in 1873, while Portland, Oregon would have an operational railway by 1869. Seattle's first railway, known as the Walla Walla Railroad, would connect to the already existing East Side Company's Portland, Oregon Railroad. For beginners to this subject, you'll want to start with lighter reading material. This channel highly recommends the critically acclaimed novel The Little Engine That Could. Ornate facades could be imitated from historic buildings and then hung on the steel-framed tall buildings, the new architecture being built in the late 19th century.
So I was challenged by somebody who left a comment in my last video on Seattle
this
Underground.
guy is spiteful,
And she
man.
took issue
Holy moly.
with the fact that I used the term old.
What is that?
I just said he's very mean-spirited, let's say.
Well, that's
the little.
I mean,
engine that
he
could-
can be mean-spirited if he has a valid point. I guess that's what's more.
There are some valid points,
uh,
definitely, and I mean the cast iron technology is pretty interesting and pretty nice to look at, honestly. And it wouldn't surprise me if you know, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if we did actually have that technology in those times. So, you know, he has a valid point there for sure.
So let me just say, because I'm also fascinated, of course, by these, cast iron things and doors and fences or whatever they have. And at one point I looked it up actually for Austria, and there is a particular company name that's like a, designer architect, and they have all these drawings for like really beautiful iron cast different things, right? Also from around this time, I would say 1880. This was when supposedly there was still monarchy in Austria. And the way I thought about it, but this is, pure speculation. Of course, it is possible that they made it the way they said, and, they had this technology then, and the monarch ordered it, or God knows what. Or they stumbled across, because of whatever catastrophe or war or whatever happened, a city, or they were able to repopulate a city. And then in order not to make it seem too suspicious, I start my guys making drawings of the things that I find, and then start claiming that I produced it. So this would not, I mean, this is a common modus operandi in terms of relabeling things and taking credit for things that maybe you actually didn't really have so much to do with. So just to point that out, because it's quite difficult, of course, to trace anything that's further back than 100 years, I mean, even 50 years. So this is just a little bit that I know about it, that there are these drawings and so on, but that doesn't, what I was about to say now is, can we please see this process, how it would work today? Like, I want to see this happening. And because so far, this was also just hypothetical, and maybe this works today. I'm not in construction, but that would be something to follow up with. How practical is it? How heavy are these things really? And of course, he's talking about the railroad, just to throw it out, because it's a common question. Did they really build all of those lines, or how much of it was also just removed from whatever type of mud flood appeared to have happened everywhere, or dug out basically, instead of really newly built? But that's another open question. Yeah, that's it.
I think Conspiracy or us should join the debate.
I just wanted to add, I think that Woody and you are, sometimes they do really great research. There were claims that were being made about the ornate columns, that are on so many of these buildings, and we couldn't possibly have carved them. And they found patents and diagrams and actual photographs of amazing machines that basically would carve these things out of pure stone, like you would carve wood on a lathe. And I never knew those things existed. And they went into the whole brick making thing because a lot of people were making claims, especially with the Tartarian meltdown, or not that channel specifically, but the whole meltology subject of all the mountains were formerly buildings and they were all made of red brick. And then there's that classic moment where Karen B asks Jerry DeCamp, like, well, where did all the brick come from? And he basically says we imagined them into existence. But the claims that were being made by many in the community were that it was impossible to have made all of this brick. And so UR just started looking into the whole brick making thing and what was being said about it and what were in their manuals and how many could they produce per day and how many of these factories were there. And it very well could have been made. So I thought that was fantastic research that I complimented him for. But then that conclusion is used to, again, just throw the whole subject under the bus.
Yeah,
I want to add on this as well, if I can.
Go ahead.
So, like we said before, if you want to destroy an argument, you need to attack it on its strongest point, not on its weakest. And the strongest point of the argument for constructing elaborate structures in the past and to the feasibility of it or not, I think really comes back to, we all remember the marble statues of fishnet and gowns draped over naked bodies. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So if you want, and if we want to talk about ability of fine crafting, you don't have to invent some crappy cast iron molds. You have to explain these things, and they're supposedly happened even before. So where's the technology? Where is the craftsmanship and the accuracy and all that? I mean, am I wrong? I mean, am I just being a dick? Is that completely off the rails, or is that actually logical extreme to take this point to, if people want to attack or explain these abilities that we supposedly had?
Yep. And we're still not talking about the mud flood.
Maybe let's finish the video.
Exactly.
Yeah.
World to qualify architecture in Seattle, some architecture. She said, basically, my terminology is twisted, and don't you know the old world is in the east and the new world is in the west? Well, here's my response. What else do I call this? This is an old world building, if I've ever seen one. And what is this top made out of? Is this roof here? Is this metal? It sure looks like it. And here it shows up in 1882, according to the official record.
Here's where the lady is right, and the terminology is being twisted by Matthew and his fellow Tartarian researchers, whom now identify as Old World researchers, whose pronouns are they, them, fifth columnist. Byzantine architecture is also being described as an Old World architecture. Romanesque is described as Old World architecture. Gothic is described as Old World architecture. Pyramids are described as Old World architecture. These four styles of architecture are completely different, and when using the power of observation, belong to different regions and different time periods. But the they, them, fifth columnists are twisting all styles of architecture into one, which was previously described as Tartarian architecture. Another common tactic from the Old World researchers' playbook is to state, we find the same type of architecture all around the world without providing any proper context. For example, the LiDAR drones uncovering vast swatches of the Mayan Empire in Central America have yet to reveal a star fort. As Matthew highlights Seattle from the late 19th century, neither Romanesque, Gothic, or any other style of early world architecture is featured. The style of architecture found across the world, which the they, them, fifth columnists are referring to, is known as neoclassical, a revival of classical architecture during the 18th and early 19th century.
The very first version of precast building components was right there at hand. And
he's talking about these four different time periods of architecture, but that's an assumption made on the mainstream historical narrative that those were all from different time periods, and they could very well have been built similar times but had different functions. So it's yeah. And I totally agree with what I think David said before, that the subject needs to be steel-manned. They need to be going after the strongest of the arguments.
That's it. Thank you.
I do think they could be from different. How do you say? From different times or I mean, of course, from different places, obviously. But I think what people are mostly referring to, in general, as Tartarian architecture is mostly like neoclassical, like sort of neo-Gothic architecture that you see all over the world, like including in the far east, like in Japan or Vietnam or whatever, where you find these old pictures of neoclassical architecture that looks perfectly European, and that's I think what most people are looking at, rather than all these disparate architectural styles. So obviously monolithic architecture and stuff also plays a role, and that's part of the puzzle, but I think we all accept that it's part of a different time frame, let's say.
Yeah, and I just like to say I misspoke. I didn't mean to suggest that they were all built at the same time. I just mean that they were all potentially part of the old world, including the star forts, including the pyramids. And yeah, they probably were built at different time periods, but all of them collectively, in my opinion, are part of this ancient time. But I could be wrong.
All right. Shall we continue?
Yes.
To hit the market. Victorian and neoclassical buildings were in vogue, and more buildings were being constructed with steel skeletons, onto which it was a simple matter to attach the facade components.
While architect Matthew Smith sees an old world building, Wood & Nichols is witnessing an architect that has been duped by architecture. Having applied 25 minutes worth of research from the first 5 minutes into the edited version of Old World Seattle, with the original video being a two-parter totaling 2 hours, Wood & Nichols now seems to have a better understanding of architecture than a 25-year veteran. As Heeler states, Dr. Narco Longo, otherwise known as Old World Florida, will be reviewing his film prior to Old World Order's release to the public. I hope the good doctor has plenty of radiated bong water and Adderall handy, because he'll have quite a lot of fact-checking ahead of him.
All right, so that was Wood & Nichols and his analysis of that video. So yeah, I wonder, there's a section of the Old World Order that I kind of wanted to look at. I wonder if you guys would be interested in just kind of taking a look at that for a few minutes and see what they're talking about here.
About what?
The Old World Order video.
Okay, yeah.
So
okay,
before we continue, anybody have any comments?
Yes, so I'd say let's do that. Let me know how long the excerpt is, because then I can briefly get some water and food. And also I just pulled up a picture just because you mentioned exactly that. And for some reason, I think I literally had it open in that moment because I was scrolling through pictures. So no guarantee, but on the bottom right, you have a link for it. Nachiketa, if you want, you can very briefly share what I put on the thing, yeah. So just because exactly what you mentioned, if this is correct, yeah, I don't know about the southern one, but yeah, I know there's quite a few of these examples, and yeah, well, you know, just explain that how, strangely enough, all these so divergent cultures strangely decided to do the same thing, because an official, I mean, yeah, whatever. I mean, it's whoever can believe the official timeline, good luck.
Raphael, because imitation is the highest form of flattery, of course.
Well, exactly. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
They were part of the Axis powers, you know.
That must be it. Yeah, and also not mentioning or noticing, of course, at all, which I find, how should I say, almost, I don't know, suspicious in itself or not, that there was not a single mention of Professor Anatoly Fomenko or New Chronology or Gleb Nosovsky, which, I mean, is still a relevant piece of the whole puzzle, no matter which buildings or pictures maybe changed or not, or whatever he's talking about. So, yeah.
Or what a scoundrel Joseph Scaliger was, who our entire Western historical narrative is based upon his work,
Right.
as I understand
That's
it.
pretty funny, yeah.
Yeah.
Did I mention, by the way, we found a church in Greece where they found a second a bottom, like underneath the ground, they found a second layer of groundwork, and underneath that they found like allegedly Roman bathhouses for the 1000th time, and they're you know they're still they're still trying to sell the same narrative.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's what you do. You go to church and then you all take a bath together. You know, that's
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean,
everybody is
to
like,
be
you
fair,
know,
to be fair,
everybody has
they do-
sin, right? Everybody
Yeah,
is,
exactly.
you know.
To be fair, they do exactly that at mosques. So
Not like that. Not like the Greek bath.
Wait, because now suddenly, now that you bring that up, why are there actually bathhouses underneath churches? If you could actually, it might not be like a water thing, the water technology or whatever pumping stations that the churches were, but actually just mosques, and they just had bathhouses because they had to clean themselves before they go pray.
Yeah. That's important. I mean, at mosques, that's a very important thing. Like one of the things they say is like you got to wash your feet and face and stuff like that before you go you go into a mosque. So they have these places outside the mosque where you can go and you know, wash your hands and feet and face and stuff like this. And I think it's even in the Quran that it talks about that.
And you could even combine the two. You could even combine it with like organs and healing music and like magnetized water, and just wash yourself in that water before you go pray as well. It would even be even more effective, you know.
That's the longer lines I'm thinking of. If you can have all of that, you do all of it at water treatment, power plant, and bath at the same time, if it's possible.
Yeah, and a place of prayer, you know. So you're basically like, it's like, yeah, it's amazing. Hell yeah.
So, like,
one second.
Yeah, go ahead.
So there was a question in the chat. I think it keeps coming up, and people are confused about that. Mark Bloom was asking if Tartaria is a placeholder for all these different topics like mudflood, Cabbage Patch Kids, orphanage, and all that, or if it was like a global civilization. And the answer is we don't know. So it is a placeholder to kind of tie all these things together as fields of inquiry. And the question is hanging in the air: was it a global civilization or not? Was it a region? It's just that all these topics are adjacent to the Tartaria topic, so it has kind of just borne out that they are referred to in many cases under the topic of Tartaria, but it is not, settled science or anything. It's just in general mentioned under the same umbrella term.
It definitely wasn't global, but it may have been realm-wide.
That's right. That's exactly what I mean. Thank you. Thank you.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, it was a realm in itself, to be fair.
Yeah, and I think it was a placeholder term. That's my knowledge of it after looking into this for 7 years, and
I personally don't agree, honestly.
Hold on a second, Alexander. Let him finish first, please.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I just mean that there was a realm-wide civilization, and Tartaria was a part of it. And Tartaria became the placeholder term because of the maps, because there were histories of the lineages of the different rulers of Tartaria. There was so much evidence to show that Tartaria existed. But then people started making all kinds of claims about it, and those were flimsy claims that were easily debunked. And so everyone threw Tartaria under the bus when really what you were looking at was a realm-wide civilization. And I just wanted to add, I posted a link in the chat to a series exposing Joseph Scaliger, who's the dude that pretty much our entire Western historical chronology is based on his work. And it's from a channel called Logos Media. It's like a 6-part series, and it's extremely well done, where they've gone into all the primary resources, and the guy really debunks himself when you read his own writings.
Okay, go ahead, and you can respond now.
Yeah, no, I mean, I honestly now ended up agreeing with Stellium. No, what I just wanted to say was, I don't think, I don't know in how far we're actually talking about a realm-wide, let's say, civilization per se. I don't think that has to be the case. I think Tartaria is actually, was a place and was more or less a realm-wide empire because it reached from at least from Russia all the way to North America, basically. So if there was a realm-wide empire, I think that's the one, regardless of how we interpret like what kind of technology they had, how their history evolved. Because like as I mentioned before, Ancient Historia has done some really amazing research based on academic resources that exist that should be accepted by any historian worth his salt, because all those documents are in archives that are legitimate. So there are references to Tartaria, to a gigantic empire that has existed and that was at war with Russia for God knows how long, on one hand, and with England on the other, by the way, and we know all that, so those are facts. So I don't think it's just a placeholder. I think Tartaria is a big chunk of the research that we have to be doing, and the name is apt. Obviously, there are adjacent subjects, and obviously because after its decline, there were a whole lot of things that came out of it, like the orphan trains and all that stuff. But we also know that those started in Russia. We have good reason to believe that those were a result of the collapse of the Tartarian Empire, and so on and so forth. So all that information, I think, is available, and I think we know more than we think actually about the subject. I think we're pretty much on the money when it comes to the name and the topic of research.
Yeah, well, I mean, like it's it can be like a little bit of both. I mean, it's a bit of a placeholder the way I look at it, but also, there's a place called Tartaria that existed in the past. The way I kind of look at it is that I don't think anybody here accepts any academic, school indoctrinated narrative that's been given to us, and that's why we have gone into the various different topics that we have. Flat Earth. Invention of languages and Tartaria and such. So Tartaria is like a big canopy in the sense of like trying to, rediscover what the actual history was. And of course, like people are going in all different directions with it. I mean, like I think most everybody here probably can agree that mud flood happened. Do we have an idea exactly when that happened, or there could have been a possibility of multiple mud floods happening, or I guess some people might say, well, like, no, mud flood is not a thing, because I've definitely heard people say that. I mean, like, obviously people who deny, quote unquote, deny mud flood does not believe that, these buildings were covered. And I don't know where they think that why these buildings are, covered, or like, why they have these first story buildings, first stories or two stories where it's like underground. I don't know why they would think that that's kind of a normal thing, but they have their explanations. It's like, go ahead.
I mean, in many cases, they didn't even know those existed, like those extra stories underneath the ground. Like, for example, like all those videos that Conspiracy R Us is posting about like Melbourne and I don't know, like what was it, like in Canada, all these places and so forth, where they're finding basically like pre-colonial, colonial artifacts. So that means that like we've basically colonized the place before the official story says that we did, and then it got flooded, and then we recolonized it basically. And not just there. I mean, we find the same types of artifacts in Holland, which has been which is a European country, has a longer history allegedly than the American colonies. But they have, and obviously Holland is very, very susceptible to flood and has a lot of mud floods because that's just a fact of life in Holland. They have a lot of cities that were just replaced, they were flooded. They moved them a few miles back where there was firm ground, and they built a new city there. And they named it the same because it was just the people they moved. So you have that in Holland. So why is it so strange to accept that that existed in Australia and in America and in Russia and wherever?
Yeah. And another question that probably kind of comes up though too is like, where did this mud come from? And I've heard about this when buildings cry. I've forgotten his name, but he talked about this as well, where he says, "Oh, you know, like it's dustification or some kind of
yeah,
and then that got mixed in with water, and that's where the mud came from." Like, does anybody
that's
have?
such bullshit, man? If you ask an archaeologist, why are you digging? Why do you have to do excavations? Bro, I don't think they know what the answer is to that question. I mean, they have theories
Well,
about
I mean,
sediments and stuff
aren't
that
they
are
told that like further you dig down, that like, you know, things will get older? You know, that's like the whole idea of the stratus and stuff like this, right?
exactly.
Right.
Yeah. That's such a. I mean, if you have an environment that's being lived in, you keep it clean in general. Most people generally do. I mean, sure, there will be some houses that have some trash around them, but you can't bury a house with trash because, like, by the time you're dead, someone else will take over the building, and they will have a different lifestyle, so they will clean it up. You know, it's impossible to create a sediment through like however much time by just living someplace, because the opposite actually is true. Because the more you know how when people walk, thousands of people keep walking over the same stairs, they become like all slippery, and because of the erosion of all the feet that are going up and down, right? So it's the opposite. The more people live in a place, the cleaner it actually becomes, because you constantly have that erosion.
We're
They're
polishing the
constantly.
place by
Yeah,
walking over
exactly.
it. Okay.
So
Okay.
it's the
Go ahead,
opposite
Raphael.
of creating a sediment.
No, just thank you for bringing it up. This sediment idea never made sense to me. Also, I love to bring up in Vienna city center at Michaelerplatz, there is an excavation site now officially. You can go there as a tourist and you kind of look down a few meters. And supposedly they only discovered this because they were building the metro lines, and then were like, oh, there's old Roman buildings there, or arches or whatever they had. So yeah, I just wanted to thank you for pointing that out, because this whole sediment story never made sense. And in terms of stairs slippery, the school I had shown earlier, this is the one thing they actually did, because they were very careful, you know, to always make sure the paintings stay fresh. They always had extra money for that, you know. I mean, the whole topic of, how do you call it, landmark preservation or whatever, and the offices they have, I think that's a rabbit hole unto itself. You know, what kind of people get into position to decide what is restored in what way, what is demolished, and so on. And specifically in terms of the stairs, I mean, they must have been used for some time in that school, because they were really slippery and people regularly were like tripping and, like, you know, sliding down the stairs or something. So then eventually, while I was there, they actually, you know, took some power tools and like roughed up the stone. So yeah, it's funny what can happen over a long period. Makes stairs slippery.
Yeah. So where did the mud come from? Does anybody have an idea where the mud came from? Like, that buried all these cities all over the world?
Philip Druzhinin, he thinks that a lot of it has to do with mining. I think also volcanic activity could play a role, because if you had the whole ring of fire firing off at the same time, or at least a bunch of volcanoes, it could spew so much ash into the air. And then that, you know, obviously the volcanic activity would be mixed with earthquake activity and tsunamis. So you'd have salt water mixed with ash. And this is something that WiseUp has looked into a great deal in the years that he's had his channel, that can also lead to petrification. So it's, you know, some, like Philip, in the last video, the one I posted earlier, they were talking about the mud coming from below, but I think also the ash and the water could mix, and that could create all kinds of flooding, but you wouldn't have a flow to it. It would just be settling, which is interesting when you think about places like Göbekli Tepe in modern Turkey, where you know, they're claiming that was buried by hand, because there's no evidence of flow, but there are all these different layers, and they date it back to 12,500 years BC, etc. But it could very well have just fallen from the sky and slowly covered everything up.
Yeah, that's what I suspect as well. I mean, like how else would we be able to explain this, like global, again, in quotes, like all these buildings all over the world being buried together like that. And then I think Michelle Gibson, whom I will be interviewing in a couple weeks, she was talking about how the bad guys basically overcharged the grid lines, the ley lines, and then that somehow caused a cataclysm of some kind. Do you have any thoughts on this, Mike, and anybody else?
Yeah, I think I'm not sure if that's exactly how Philip would describe it, but he suspects that the star forts are directly related to mining, and it could have totally been a mishap, or they hijack hijack the system and reverse the lines or something like that. There's lots of theories. I don't know if there's anything conclusive.
So basically, like how all the coastlines in England look like they're mined. That's kind of what you're suggesting, that maybe the star forts were basically terraforming the Earth.
Perhaps, yeah. The star forts are a fascinating subject because you're not just talking about the forts; you're talking about the star citadels, which are the cities themselves.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
And so we have all the quote unquote Tartarian architecture, the old world stuff. Most of the time, that is sitting within these massive structures. So those structures were there before the cathedrals and all of these other gigantic buildings.
Yeah.
I wanted to quickly touch on this. So we talk about a realm-wide cataclysmic phenomenon, and we haven't really even settled on how the realm even works. So we're quite literally just poking around in the dark. Like, we don't know, is the sun a plasma phenomenon? Is it a ball of fire? What's the moon? How does the atmosphere work? What's the electrical, like, what's gravity? Even does it exist? Is it an electrostatic phenomenon? Like, and pretty much I'm pretty sure that when we have these things actually verified and have like a more clearer model, we'd probably be like, oh yeah, that's the only way it could have been with the mud flood, and that's why it makes sense, all these tree stumps and these holes in the ground where maybe water came from, or maybe it came from the sky, or whatever it might be. But we kind of trying to explain the symptom before we have actually selected like an actual cause. We have like 20 different ways that our realm could work. So how can we land on what these causes produce? I don't think we can. I don't want to be a dick here, but just realistically, why don't you have to first be sure about the causes that are causing things before you kind of narrow down the things that can come from these causes?
Sure.
Yeah, you have to
do you have any proposals?
Well, kind of the thing that has the most correlation, I think, with the things that seems most probable is this idea that let's say we have like a flat realm. We don't know how far it stretches out. Then there seems to be some kind of firmament over it. And there's reports of there being some permeable ground level portals through that possibly are from time to time open and closed, and we don't really know. And then there seemed to be this moon thing and this sun thing, where we don't really know, is it a reflection thing? Is it a focal point from outward light? Is it a plasma phenomenon in this firmament? Or we have thunder and we have cloud movement. We have a lot of electricity, static electricity, so we can kind of assume that the clouds and the thunder point towards there being a lot of electric potential in there. And well, those are like the more more established things among the hard to establish things. And then you have a ton of other notions like oil replenishing in the ground, like is volcanic activity related to electrostatic changes in the atmosphere? What's even happening in the Earth? Supposedly there are like sun mass ejections, but what does that mean in this model? So of course I don't have any answer to these things. I'm just kind of collecting hypotheses and trying to piece them together. It's like a puzzle where no piece fits, and when you find one that fits, you just have a good day and collect more. And you know, it's not like you just piece the pieces together and then at the end of the day have your perfect picture. It's just, that would be cool, but
it would be boring.
Yeah, it would suck, because then what do you do tomorrow?
Exactly, yeah.
Anybody else? Shall we take a look at this video for a little bit?
Yes.
You have to ask yourself this: why is there such a lack of construction photos from the inside of the buildings? The outside's incredible, but the inside is built like a palace. There's such a lack of photos from the inside of these buildings, and they're incredible. When you had the Kleksinski building in Chicago that took 14 years, and then you come back and you look at the one before that, the Federal building, built in 7 years. How is that possible? They're not gonna be able to bring these things all the way up to the top, get these people that have no training, and actually create this amazing thing that lasts forever in a timeline where they tell you they were riding around on horses and wagons, where this should not be accepted. It's just not going to happen in the amount of time that they're telling us.
We know people cook the books in other areas. We know people have manipulated photos for the sake of deceiving people, just like NASA does. This isn't a new thing. It's an old thing, but it's still being done today. You find photo manipulation. Now, CGI, the techniques have developed substantially. But back then, they thought they were at the cutting edge. They didn't think that they would be caught onto.
Or maybe they didn't care. Like, by the time they figure this shit out, who cares? We'll be long gone. And who cares?
They have their stories. Everything has something to explain it within the last 100 to 200 years.
I even called the Illinois State Archives building, and they didn't have information on their own courthouse that's located within 1 mile of itself.
Illinois State Archives, how may I help you?
Hey, I was just transferred to you because I was looking at the Supreme Court when it was built, and I was just trying to find like records on it, and it said it was saying like on their website it was saying that it was built in like a year. So I was just trying to figure out if that was true or not.
I would have you tried contacting the Supreme Court?
Yeah, and they sent me over to you guys.
Okay. I don't know what we would have on the building itself. Let me look here.
Yeah, it was saying on their website that it was the keys were given over on February 4th, 1908. But 1908, they also said that they were moving out of the old state capitol building. So I don't know, 2 months. It doesn't sound right.
Yeah, that sounds kind of odd. Let's see here. I don't know if we have anything on the building itself.
The stories that we've been told are basically just that. They're stories that we're repeating over and over, and we're just regurgitating what they've been telling us. You could either choose to believe it, or you could choose to research and see the truth, that these are buildings from the past civilization.
I'm standing in front of the sunken ship parking garage, which is in the exact spot as the Occidental building. Now, the Occidental building was built supposedly in 1882 and was destroyed in the Great Fire. That was a giant masonry, massive 3-4 thick wall of just solid.
All right, let me stop it there for now. So this argument again about horse and buggies, and the people on the other side basically always say that that is a bit of a straw man. And do we think or feel this that way about it, or is it a bit of a straw man to talk about horse and buggies and how we can create these buildings? And could there be other explanations as to why? Let's just assume that you can't build a building in a year. I mean, I'm on that camp. But then is there any other explanation as to why they might lie about that, other than to hide, this history? Maybe there's some kind of financial stuff that was going on. I don't know.
There could definitely. I mean, I think there could definitely be a scenario where you could make up a story like that to cook the books. Let's say for some, maybe for like getting a loan to build something else or something like that, I guess. But I don't think that it would be done on that scale. if it was just like simple like I don't know, text route or whatever.
They're always talking about horse and buggy, and what's interesting is the construction photos. Like the roads are always like dirt, so I think it's interesting. Like you don't see a whole lot of the transport of the materials used to build these gigantic buildings. You see the scaffolding and the ladders lying, but I suppose it is a straw man when you make that claim that it couldn't possibly be done with horse and buggy, because when they were made, we don't know what the technology was, that was being used.
Yeah, and in the image you saw before, you see two distinct styles of architecture. You see this turn of the century kind of city building, and right beside of it you see what we now call a traditional building style. But if you see them side by side, it looks really weird. On the right you have this thing, and on the left, in the background, you see another one. It's basically a house with a 45-degree angled roof. So yeah, that's also interesting. But of course, when we see these massive doors here, I mean, there's just no question. Like that's something completely different. And these small people there, what are they doing? They look like the leftovers.
What if you have very large furniture, David? And you needed those large doors to bring in the.
Oh no, you're right. I
I
concede my point.
And sofa.
You're right. You're absolutely right. You destroyed my. You're right. I'm sorry.
I know it's completely buried into
And
in the ground now.
You need to ride the elephants also in your living room. I saw that in the chat earlier. What about the horses and the elephants? That's exactly like, yeah, that's true.
All right, let's continue on a little bit longer.
We had giant books. We had giant helmets. We had giant knives, giant samurai swords, giant rifles. We had giant shoes. We had giant crowns. We had giant typewriters, giant bells.
Giant this and that, things that don't seem suited for the average sized person, even on the taller side. It just doesn't make sense. And to think that large communities of people got together and built structures that were excessive, costly to begin with, but then you're adding the factor that they're building for a greater size than they need. It's not very cost efficient. It's not in line with what we're told about frontier America.
So even just compared to me, right, in terms of a hip placement, my knee is up here and I'm 5'11". So these are really large individuals. Really large individuals.
And then when you think about it, it's not even that big of a deal, really. Like, what's the big deal? There was giant people.
All right. So, what is the idea behind hiding giant people in the past? Like, what is the big deal?
That's a good question.
I've often wondered that, unless it's just like there's an ancient civilization and they want to wipe out the history of it in every single way, whether it's the architecture or you name it.
Yeah. Maybe there's a reason for them to want to do that. Maybe it really wasn't fun. Like living among fucking Tartars and giants and yeah, maybe they were like, I mean,
it was just a pain in the ass. We had to get rid of them all. We were tired of going through giant doors, making giant shoes for them.
That, dude. I mean, those giants, like there's stories about Native American giants or like cannibals and whatever. So I mean, maybe all those giants were cannibals. Maybe like this whole empire was like a big fucking hellscape we were living in. And
we might have been their food.
Yeah,
I mean, look at the Paris.
Yeah, we still are, So there's that too.
I think it's a case of generational slow cooking the frog. I mean, so I can't really back that up completely, but it's just a thought experiment. Just like we see these massive tree trunks, and we still have today trees. although if you look at these big tree trunks, they're nothing more than moss. And we don't know what are the time frames between something like Devil's Tower and our today's trees, or these like redwoods. But could it be that over time, when the environment changes, the size of the entities change? I think so, because now there's this thing called electroculture, where people put high frequency electricity in the garden environment and copper antennas to basically create an environment that is electrostatically charged, and the plants react to it by growing bigger. So if we were to say there was an environment in the past, maybe with these massive trees and maybe a lot more ether or whatever in the atmosphere, more electrostatics, the plants would grow bigger and the humans would grow bigger. So the only thing I can see this working out is that the environment changed in terms of electrostatic or ether availability. And that's why the animals, the trees, and the humans, they got smaller. Maybe the trees got smaller first, or what I think is more realistic, because I think this whole bioenergy is really what the ether is or was. Like when you're stressed out and you have anxiety and you hug a tree, you will notice how your nervous system calms down. And there's a lot of research into that. I'm just kind of giving you the cheekiest one. But basically, I think the trees are actually the generators of this ether or whatever that medium is we're immersed in. So I think to attack a whole realm that is based on trees creating the core nutrient for the realm, you would cut down the trees. So I think what happened is the trees were cut down, and then everything became smaller and smaller, and then it was taken over. I don't say this lightly, but with everything I can see is like, and we can have like hours and hours of conversation. I think most of you though have seen all the pieces of the puzzle, and this is just like the most likely thing I'm drawing from that. Although, you know, I can't like fully back this up because of the nature of things, but just the most probable is kind of this is what it looks like to me.
Yeah, that seems
All
actually
right.
very plausible. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a little bit of a mystery, but I definitely think you know, some like I like the straw man argument, not a straw man, but like another devil's advocate argument. It's like, well, maybe they want you to think that giants existed, and that's why, you know. But I mean, like it's not even a real argument though. So anyway, let's continue on with this video.
Another element of history they've conveniently helped you forget about. A luxurious form of travel that was promptly removed from our skies.
Airships are the oldest form of air travel. They're the most time tested. Now they've been taken out of circulation. A lot of people have the false misconception that if you were traveling on an airship, you would be confined to the little cabins that were suspended from the bottom, you know, like the pilot's cockpit. You'd probably feel a little iffy about those coming down, being on the bottom of the ship. It's coming down, you look like you're gonna get smushed. Well, that big blimp is not just a balloon. In many, many airships of the old world, you had access into that large cavity of the blimp. There were restaurants, there were bars, there were dance halls, things like this. This is all a matter of fact.
Why would they build such a big thing and not put anything inside? So it's basically like a cruise, but a comfortable cruise where, you know, you're not sitting in the bottom part of the airship where they normally show you on a blimp. You're sitting in the airship. It's a beautiful place.
A beautiful, easy, graceful method of travel, flush down the drains. They're actually safer than airplanes. And what we had was a mass media event in the form of the Hindenburg, which actually scared most of the world's population away from ever getting in an airship again.
I mean, wouldn't that be amazing to ride in one of those things and like go from like, you know, Germany to America or wherever? I mean, that would be just awesome, I would say.
Oh yeah, I know. I have a friend who recently got his pilot diploma, so he can now legally fly planes. And I asked him about the subject, and he was telling me like they're actually considering. He told me that they told him like in the academy that they're actually considering bringing them back, the airships, but mostly for like. I'm not sure what. Yeah, mostly for like freight or something. And I was like, what? Wait, what? But he actually did say, he did admit that it's the safer way to travel. So I mean, pilots are aware of this. You know, it's no secret.
So anybody else have any thoughts on why? I mean, like, you know, a lot of stuff is the way I'm looking at it. You know, they just destroyed everything. They got rid of the Steam stuff, and people are talking about, oh yes, you know, the Steam engine stuff was getting outdated, and that's the reason why, you know, we replaced it with new stuff. But there's a other argument, which is that actually they don't want you to know what kind of technology existed, so they just started destroying all these Steam engines and all the older technology, including these blimps. And then, you know, they have events like the Hindenburg and say, like, look how dangerous it is. You're going to get burned alive, you know, and then everybody dies. And then you have a false flag event. And then everybody just kind of goes on and say, okay, I guess no more. Of course, airplanes never crash. So, right.
Isn't there also a story about trains or train engines being repurposed so that they kind of used maybe a steam water related and then were repurposed to coal? Maybe I'm making this up right now. I'm not exactly sure, but just made me think, of course, because steam again is just water. We have all the water in the supposed, you know, churches or power plants. So that also fits together. And in terms of Hindenburg, especially with the little bit we've seen recently of how media operations are constructed, I mean, listen to the original recording, and I mean, this is a drama play, and from what I understand, anyhow, they deliberately used the wrong type of gas. So this is kind of ridiculous then to say, or to still pretend it's dangerous or people don't want it, when you well know you just use a non-flammable gas or whatever, and you reduce the risk by 99%. And what I would suspect here is, of course, they needed to change everything to oil. And of course, the airplane also runs on oil. I mean, oh, sorry, this was the other thing, because that's the next rabbit hole. How much fuel do they really need? So I guess right now they probably prefer this method, because here they can always claim, oh, you need to pay for your flight ticket because the oil is so expensive, this and that, you know?
Yeah, and
Right.
when you think about,
Yeah.
Right.
Go ahead.
When you when you think about, if we had like a realm and we had a dome and maybe we had semi-permeable or from time to time permeable gates through that, what would be the easiest method of transportation through that? It wouldn't be a ship, because the water can be unpredictable and there's these ice things floating around. It would be some kind of airborne travel. And you have these winds, so maybe aircraft that we have now are just not ideal. Maybe it would be airships, and maybe that is the reason that they're just phased out. Although there have been many companies who had supposedly good prototypes and good working models, but they were all mysteriously not able to produce something into production and into market. So now there's a lot of ifs, of course, but I'm just thinking, if blimps were easily available, they were low fuel, they're low upkeep, they would probably just have a harder time keeping everyone from checking out what is in Antarctica and if the rumors are true. So I think it just comes down to very pragmatic reasons of which technology to allow and which not to just manage the narrative of the globe Earth more cost effectively. Just, like a farm manager, he chooses which fence material and which frequency for his electric fence to use, and he makes a pragmatic decision. And that's all there's to it. That's kind of how I see that.
It's exactly that, to not allow everyone to accidentally or on purpose think or fall outside of the box that it's constructed, whether societally or geographically. And then, of course, and we can very obviously see this with the supposed 1970s war on drugs and whatever, in this case in particular with hemp, anything that is too effective or efficient, so then it would allow basically to, in my mind at least, bring the scarcity economics ad absurdum, like make it obsolete just because you have efficient energy transmission, efficient agriculture, and so on. Then there is, I think, no more scarcity game left to play. And that would also then allow you to, again, think of other things and think of things beyond. So that's why all of those technologies, whether plants, actual technologies, patents, transportation methods, those are the ones, elements, mercury comes to mind, that's what's restricted for the children, so very simple.
You know what's not restricted for children?
With children, I mean everyone here, but please explain.
Sugar. Sugar
course,
is probably
yes.
like the worst. The worst. It's worse than cocaine. It's like it's so bad, and everyone's eating it.
Yeah, yeah. Who's munching on something? Tell us what you're eating.
Whoa,
Sounds like a
sorry.
rabbit. It's so funny.
Oh, I thought I was muted. Sorry, guys.
Are you eating lettuce? What is that?
No, but that's the punishment of having your mic open. You have to tell us what you're eating now, Mike.
Oh, I don't have to share it with everybody like in school. Yeah, it's
well, it's the closest we can get.
Something crunchy.
Fin crisp with a bit of cream cheese and cucumber.
Sounds delicious. All right, so shall we continue with this video a little bit longer, or are you guys done with it?
No, let's go. Yeah.
Many times these towers held old world technologies, such as bells, which would send out resonant frequencies into the community beyond. So many photos of bells being rounded up all over Europe. We're living in a time where we're waking up to what we so recently had.
The pipe organ is a healing machine. That's why it was integral to the construction of ancient Gothic cathedrals. The organ was the centerpiece of the church, of the cathedral. Now, around the building, up, down, around, beneath, you had pipes and essentially speakers blasting this music into the cathedral.
They place these beautiful organs under these stained glass windows, which are treated with lens and specific properties. And these, I think, they work like speakers. They augment the resonance and the sound out into the ether outside. So everyone outside in the community is invigorated, is on a higher state of consciousness, literally being the best they can. And you can see it in the pictures of these people in the day. Everyone is healthy.
Anyone who's been around for a full volume, live, authentic pipe organ performance will tell you your bones rattle, your organs start to respond, your hairs on the back of your neck stand up. Walk into a well-made stone cathedral, hear the pipe organ, sit there and saturate in the healing frequencies yourself. Cathedrals are something beyond just a center for worship. They are healing machines. And the pipe organ of the cathedral is just one tiny little finger of this whole realm that we're talking about.
You've got starports, which I call a gateway topic because the same structure exists all over the earth, have been given to us as fortifications that were built for these different wars, which made them military targets. And so they have an excuse for why it was built in whatever location. And then they have an excuse for why it was destroyed.
So in school, we learn about one fire. We learn about the Chicago Great Fire.
In the case of the Great Chicago Fire, there was a lot of fanfare over Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicking over the lantern.
The legend is that Mrs. O'Leary's cow in a barn kicked over a lantern, and that caused the entire fire. And poor Mrs. O'Leary and her family had their lives ruined because of this.
We only learned about Chicago. And I remember going to summer camp.
All right, before we get into the Chicago thing, like the star forts, you know, like there's a lot of them all over the world, and you know, even in Asia and such. So like I heard series about them using kind of like cymatics or frequency type of thing, and they're always near water though too, like next to rivers or lakes, stuff like that. So any ideas about like what they were used for and why? I think Mike was telling us about how they might have been used for mining. How do you figure? Like how would they have been used for mining? Let's give it to Mike first, and then other people can chime in afterwards.
That's actually not my theory. That's Philip Druzhinen's theory. So I would refer to him, but he's not here. So I can't answer.
Yeah. No
And
problem.
it's not always,
Anybody else?
rivers. It's not always rivers or sea. There's some that are they have water sources that are from underground, like artesian wells. Like there's a star fort that I've reported on my channel that's about a half an hour from here, 45 minutes. It's at 823 meters altitude, and it's just a typical like 4-pointer star fort. But that star fort is 2/3 covered in mud, and it's atop a mountain that's entirely limestone, which is really fascinating because where did the mud come from? So it suggests that you know, at some point there was flooding that reached 823 meters after that thing was built. It's pretty far out.
Wow.
I have 2 videos on my channel called Star Forts I Have Known and Loved, and I cover it in, I think, the first one.
Yeah, I have a theory about star forts, or at least some ideas about what they might have been, because I think there are hints in like mainstream history, because I do think there were. I do think at least partially they were used as fortifications and used in war as well. I just think that there was like a completely different function to them, and that's kind of like expanding on Martin Liedtke's Antiquitech ideas and stuff, and how like the fasces was like an electromagnetic weapon and things like that. So I basically think a Starfort would be able to stop or to counteract like electromagnetic waves like that, and that could also explain why some forts are flooded with mud and others aren't, maybe, and things like that. So I think they may definitely have been military fortifications, or at least partially that might have been part of their job.
Yeah, in the Indian traditions, they have the Vajra, also Vajra, which is depicted as like a form of, electrical technology that the gods
exactly.
use.
Yeah, and that's congruent to the fasces and similar items that we see like in old depictions of like the gods and stuff, like the trident, for example, or like the thunderbolts that Zeus is holding. Like he's usually holding like triplets of thunderbolts in one hand, and it's kind of got the same pattern as the Vajra. And obviously the Vajra is also a thunderbolt, so that's a plasma sprite is basically a Vajra. So yeah, all those things are connected. I think Martin Liedtke is definitely onto something on that front, and I do think like Starforts are some sort of ancient technology, and I think it is connected to cymatics, but I think it could work both ways, both to heal, let's say, or to create like positive vibes, because that's literally what they are. But also to to defend against electromagnetic weaponry, and maybe also to be used as a weapon itself. And I think, for example, like the Starfort that the Statue of Liberty is standing on was also something like that.
Well, this channel called New Earth, Sylvia Ivanova, she talks about the New Earth, the Starfort, and she doesn't really believe that they were used for military purposes. I mean, they seem quite oddly shaped for, like cannons, or like what are you going to put like one cannon in the corner there and try to fend off people? Like what do you mean that they were used for military purposes, like using like resonant energy as like a
yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah,
in that way. Okay.
Yeah. So it's basically like it's both like an energy barrier. So the thing is, it's not just one frequency that you can control with a device like that, right? So that's the whole point. You can create, because it's like a musical instrument. You have to tune it, so you can attune it to like a positive energy and to cleanse the water that's going through the Starfort into the city or whatever. Because you have also the Star Citadels, or as David pointed out, which have the cathedral in the middle. So there it's more. So it's a different technology. Well, it's the same technology, but it's a different like function that has been designed into the citadels because people are actually living there. But you could still, I think, use the fortifications in that sense. But so depending on the frequency, you could create a frequency that counteracts other frequencies that are trying to attack you. So if they're firing at you with like a fascist gun, you could tune the Starfort to like a defensive frequency. Or you could tune it to an offensive frequency to blast them away, stuff like that. So it could work both ways. And I think they were capable of all those things. Each fort would be capable of all those things.
I agree. I think it's fun to ponder these things, and I think a lot of these different possibilities that we've been talking about could be true. The problem I have with this documentary, like the last 5 minutes of this documentary, it's basically just one statement of fact after another. And it's, you know, it's unfortunate that it's presented in that way, because if there's any way to debunk any one of those things, then it calls the entire documentary into the question. And the last, I think, 5 minutes of this thing are just terrible, in my opinion. I mean, my whole channel has been about Titans, about instant petrification, about, you know, these kinds of topics. And it was just cringeworthy the way they touched on those subjects at the very end. You know, anyway, that's my point. I think outlandish claims require outlandish evidence, and there's not enough of it here. There's just a lot of people just making statements of fact, and it's kind of flimsy in that respect.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Yeah, let's watch a little bit more of it and then just talk about this whole presentation, because, like, you know, I'm happy that this presentation is out, but, you know, again, I'm a little bit wary sometimes, because, like, you know, I guess, like, being a part of this truth movement or whatnot, and then, you know, there are controlled oppositions out there, and, you know, Stu Peters was kind of a notable figure during the 2020 event. I'm talking about the pandemic, but I can't use those words because I already got a warning. So we have to kind of dance around it a little bit. What's that? Go ahead.
The snake venom.
Yeah, that was like, you know, it's kind of like, what's going on there, Stu? You know, like, and you know, he kind of came out of nowhere though too, and that also really puts a lot of, like, you know, red flags in my mind, like, who the hell is this guy and where does he come from, and why is he getting all kinds of funding to make these professional videos, really? So those things all make me kind of like feel a little bit standoffish. I like the material, I like the content, but then you know, I'm not fully in the door, you know, with all of that though too, right?
100%.
Okay, yeah, so we're all on the same page in regards to that. So let's continue on a little bit longer.
Camp, and we're sitting around the campfire, and it's one dark night when we were all in bed. Oh, Miss Leary to the winter. And the cow kicked it over. She turned around and said there'll be a hot time in the old town tonight. Fire, fire, fire. And we would yell fire louder and louder with each verse. And we do this like 10 times to where it was echoing back to us across the lake. And now when I think about it, it's like, how many kids growing up in America were singing this song about this stupid story? What I realized is that it's like an incantation, and it's spellcasting. Where did this song come from? It's a story that they wanted the population to come to embrace and believe as part of the founding mythos of the country and who we are as a people. Well, lo and behold, as an architect with a keen interest in history, I come to find out only within the last few years that there were fires in every major city. And then I come to find out that it's not just wooden shanty town built out of matchsticks. We're looking at city after city after city with photographic evidence showing masonry buildings of the most exquisite type.
Philadelphia, New York, Boston. You come down to Florida, Jacksonville, Miami. Every major city at one point was burned to the ground. Believe it or not, these were stone cities. These were megalithic stone cities, ancient metropolises that were burned down as if they were made from wood very quickly. Now we can speculate as to what the source of that destruction was, from above, from below, arson, you know, biblical destruction, you name it. Nonetheless, every major city in America, if not Europe, the entire world, saw a great devastation by a fire.
You'll see pictures, people walking on the sidewalk, like, no big deal. I mean, that's subjective, but I mean, that's what it looks like. The pictures are strange. The sequence of events that are supposed to take place are strange. So, you know, there's just a lot of clues, if you will, that these weren't random events like somebody wants us to believe.
If you look at photos of even the buildings that still exist of the old world, they always give a backstory for why they took them down, but it's just curious why so many towers are missing now. And so Pioneer Square is one of those examples. And this was built in the immediate aftermath of the fire in 1889. Is curious because it appears on a real estate map from before the fire in the fully and intact form.
In order for stone to burn down, it has to reach 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. House fire reaches the temperature of 1,000 degrees. That's half. It's impossible for any stone building to be burning down. The 1800s and earlier fires may have been fake. They try to explain away multiple buildings with fire stories and multiple courthouses built on the same site in just a year with the same architect, and they're just demolishing these buildings.
This is exactly why my fireplace right here is made of brick and stone, because it doesn't melt. You got to be an idiot to think that these forest fires are going to be melting brick and stone. Use your head, guys.
As they are busy dismantling it in the 3D reality that we
All right. So Betsy the cow, tipping the lantern over, as we probably all have at least in the American education system, in Chicago, caused the Chicago fire, and then we all joke about how stupid that cow was, and everybody died, and all the buildings went to the ground, and right, and then there must have been other Betsy the cow cows in other cities, because I don't remember which book that David Ewing Jr. Put this information in, but there was like what, over 100 cities around the world that all burnt down to a crisp because of this a similar narrative of Betsy the cow, tipping a lantern over and burning everything down. So I don't think anybody here believes that, right? But then my lunch break guy was saying is that maybe these are fake. I don't think it doesn't look like fake to me. I think some kind of destruction probably happened in the past. So then what are we looking at here? Any ideas?
I'll chime in. The fire narrative, I used to live in Seattle, and you can go tour the underground. There's 2 levels at least below the city, and the narrative is that the fire burned everything down, and then they just covered over and started building again, and built all these big buildings on top of that old stuff that had been destroyed. I've never heard a good explanation for how the fires, the furniture and the different things inside of these buildings could possibly have caused the kind of damage you see on the screen right now. I heard recently that the bomberos, the fire department, in order to contain the fires, would do explosions, which could explain some of the rubble, but that doesn't really make sense. I mean, when you see that super high definition, high altitude photo of San Francisco with just rubble as far as the eye can see, those are all brick buildings. So it just doesn't make any sense. And then when you look at the underground, the tunneling systems all over the world, every major city has these vast tunnel systems. In Valencia, an hour from me, I saw an article not long ago. There's 1,600 kilometers of underground tunnels under Valencia, which is a star citadel. That's a hell of a lot of digging. And then on top, and then they're going to build on top of that and make these incredibly majestic buildings. It seems pretty far-fetched to me.
Yeah, I think it's a cataclysmic event. And I think it's basically probably like a plasma storm, basically.
I believe I got this from the channel called The Morgal, where he's speaking of supposed witness accounts from one of those fires, maybe even San Francisco one. And there in these witness accounts, they say that even though they already were miles away from the fire and looking at it, supposedly still their clothes or whatever they had with them were spontaneously combusting. So this very much then seems like, plasma frequency weapon, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So basically it's a cover up. So it's we don't believe the fires happened because of Betsy, but some kind of event happened where all these buildings went down, and they were massive stuff. So some kind of plasma fire. But then what is the possibility of a man-made stuff? Could a man-made technology lasers, directed energy weapons,
it could be a nuke.
Could that have played a role? A nuke?
Could have been a nuke. Yeah.
A nuke.
Yeah.
What kind? But yes, could be explosives of some kind.
It could be a bomb. Yeah. But I mean, it could be a nuke. It could literally be like a destructive device of a similar amounts of megatons that a nuke would produce that could level a city in one go. And I think all these cities, because that's why they say it's a fire. I think they went down in a matter of like minutes, basically. It's just one big blast and they all go down. Yeah.
Have you ever heard of this theory that nukes are fake?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, they could be, but I mean, what I'm trying to say is like it could be a man-made event. It doesn't have to be like a natural cataclysm.
Oh no, I wasn't suggesting in this case it was natural. I would suggest actually it was just some whatever, type of or variant of EMF technology they would have back then. Maybe one way to correlate aside from, what burns with fire. I mean, this reminds me, of course, of 2001. This is the first argument, of course, and then we could potentially, I never did that, but look at the patterns or the pictures and whether they doesn't look like a central big explosive to me. Yeah. So what then could also be, of course, I could also maybe set up a city, plant explosives or whatever destructive devices. Then I turn on my frequency device, and simultaneously, or because of resonance, all these small bombs go off. And from the top, my frequency, I don't know, is melting the brick or whatever.
I don't think you even need that, because like you have, like in the Old Testament, you have these, you have the Ark of the Covenant, which they just parade around the walls of Jericho, if I'm not mistaken, and they just blast a bunch of trumpets and they just melt down. I mean, it could be a similar technology like that, like just an electromagnetic, like resonance.
Yes, I actually once, unfortunately, I can't find it again. I once found what looked like a paper, scientific paper for back then, or it looked appropriate for the time. God knows when it was really printed, dated around 1860 or 1870. And it literally said something along the lines of electroacoustic weaponry, this and that. Unfortunately, I lost the document, and at least
those
search doesn't
exist,
find it.
though.
But so that would be something to investigate, and of course would correlate with the. You say it's a Bible story. Now that's great, since we know that didn't happen too long ago. So then we are honing in the time frame.
Yeah,
so yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And I
Magic
mean, those
trumpets,
technologies,
500 years ago. Yes.
And I think that's like Martin Liedtke was saying that as well. He had a whole presentation on that, so that's where I'm getting that info from. But like, he also showed like similar like vibration-based weaponry that were used in World War One, and he says that's why all we know from World War One is like how they were fighting in the mud and in the trenches, because like they were literally melting the ground underneath them and using weapons that make you shit yourself, and just basically, I mean, it was a pretty nasty affair, all things considered.
Sounds very nasty indeed.
I can totally believe that.
Yeah, and that's why the Americans invented the sonic thrower and all the sound weaponry in the 50s, 60s, 70s, because after the World War II, they got all the Nazi scientists from Operation Paperclip, and so conveniently then they invented all that shit themselves. But like Alex was just saying, they didn't invent shit.
Yeah. So let's just watch a little bit more of this, and then we can, put this to rest.
Have been talking about the subject of meltology. And my take on that and other things is that's part of it. It's not all of it. And what I believe is that there was a directed energy attack on the Earth's grid system that blew out the grids. And that caused swamps, deserts, that caused land to just shear off and fall into the ocean. And that would have caused melted buildings as well. A really good example on top of my head is a place called Red Rocks State Park in California. It looks melted. And there's other examples as well. So my belief is that there was just a massive surge of energy. So that surge of energy could have been from multiple sources and just went through the grid system and just blew everything out. When they came here, this was a destroyed and ruined landscape. And they even use the word ruins to describe things, but they push things far back in the past, like thousands of years or millions of years. And that was so far back, we don't know anything about that. The Earth was terraformed by a highly advanced civilization. And so things we think of as mountains, like the Rocky Mountains and hills, are actually buildings.
You pause it.
Yep.
I think that this was probably recorded before she got onto the subject of the big trees. and she was looking at a lot of this stuff and was thinking, oh wow, it might actually be buildings. I think that's one of those lines that I just hate that it's in this documentary where she's saying she thinks the Rockies might have formerly been buildings. I doubt she thinks that now, but it really makes this documentary look dumb in the eyes of the mainstream. Even though there's a tremendous amount of evidence for the big trees, which I've covered extensively on my channel, you know, and there's probably some pretty good evidence for the buildings as well, but to suggest that the Rockies might have been buildings is, I think that's quite a stretch.
Yeah, that's one of the things that a lot of people seem to have some issues is like, you know, people just say they're going to throw out this whole Mountaology thing because, you know, the Mountologists are saying that all mountains are buildings, you know, something like that, right? And you know, it brings a little bit of a contention to this idea. Like, I believe Mountology is true, you know, but do I believe all mountains are buildings? No. But like something happened, that's for sure. What happened and how it happened, we don't really know. But like something did happen. But then you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater because you don't necessarily believe. And you know, that's a straw man argument saying that all mountains are buildings or something like this. You know, I think that's unfair. You know, so I think I will definitely ask Michelle when I have her on here about what if her mind did change. I'll be talking about this video with her and her experience with you know, working with Hibbler and Stu Peters. So we'll see.
I'm pretty certain that it did. She and I had a conversation with Chad Williams that's on my channel. It was a 2-hour conversation about the trees, and it was a pretty new subject to her at that point that he had turned her on to. And she lives not far from Sedona, Arizona, which looks kind of like a bit like what you see there. I mean, I think that's Bryce Canyon that's on the screen right now. But, you know, it's a lot of this red sandstone layered stuff, and it just screams tree. And in fact, a lot of the names of the towns around that area that she lives all kind of hint at that old possibility as, you know, as a history. So yeah, definitely bring it up because I think it's an important point, and the way it's framed in this documentary it doesn't do the subject justice, really.
Right. Yeah. And then, you know, the giant trees is another very important subject, you know, and I don't know why some people have such a, you know, I don't know, they're so reactionary towards the fact that there could have been giant trees. Like, you know, what about the Devil's Tower? I mean, you look at that thing, and then if you actually can imagine a tree, you know, and that's the base, I mean, that tree should be going up many, many miles up in the sky, you know, like at least 15, probably 16 miles. I don't know if you can actually guesstimate, like, you know, how tall it will be, but it would have been huge. Right. And, you know, one of the things that I kind of question about, like, you know, other examples of large trees is that how they're cut so like perfectly, you know, like most of them, you know, have you ever wondered that? Like why they're like, just, it looked like somebody took a laser and just chopped it like right, you know, right across. Like, how is it possible? You know?
Well, I mean, you know, the story of, what was his name again?
Paul
I'm sure
Bunyan?
Stadium knows. No, the giant guy, Andre the Giant? No, not Andre the Giant. You know who I mean? The American legend, like
Paul Bunyan?
literal giant. Sorry,
Paul Bunyan.
was that Paul Bunyan? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, could be. Yeah.
And
We have
his
a
blue
similar.
ox, Babe, I think it's the name of the ox.
Wait, let me look it up. Yeah, the arc sounds familiar too. Paul Bunyan, yeah, probably. Yeah,
There are a lot
Paul
of
Bunyan.
giant
Yeah,
legends.
that's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he's a lumberjack.
He is.
Yeah.
He is famous.
So
Where I came from, in Wisconsin and Minnesota, we have statues of Paul Bunyan. We have stories about Paul Bunyan. That's
yeah,
why I
and we
know.
have similar. I think Raphael will know as well. We have a similar legendary giant figure in Germany. called, if I remember correctly, it was Michael Hollander or something like that.
There's probably a few. The one I think of now is Rübezahl. And there is this Iron John story, which is also supposedly from a German, actually, and not non-Grimm canon, which is especially strange. Yeah, so there's a few different giant stories. Yeah.
Let me look this up, because if I remember correctly, Michael Hollander was also a redhead, and he was also a lumberjack. But I might be mistaken about the name. But I think the name also arose from Grutte Pier, from the Netherlands, the Frisian pirate who was also a giant, and like there's photos of his sword that are like like 6.5 feet tall on their own, stuff like that. I can't find that giant now, so you might be right. Might be a different one. But there was a lumberjack.
There may be several. There may be several.
Yeah.
Anyway, what's the point? Like, you're saying that the giants cut down the trees.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
that's
who else
fine.
could have done it?
Did they have like chainsaws? Did they have like some kind of a laser to cut them just perfectly perpendicular, or like
maybe?
That's what I'm curious about.
If we're talking about the trees that are like the mesas in the US, then we're not just talking about giants anymore. We're talking about a titan.
Right.
So who knows what they could do? Maybe they have like laser eyes or something or whatever, that they could just slice through the trees or what. I don't know.
They would have to just like get down on their like stomach and then like kind of look up and then just like laser it straight across.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
Who knows? Probably. Yeah. Oh, but, well, look, maybe they had chainsaws. No, you don't even need a chainsaw. I mean, you could just have two giants with a saw,
a crosscut
like that.
Giant,
yeah, exactly.
Giant crosscut saw.
Yeah,
No, like my question is this: is I'm just surprised how like perfectly cut they are. If they are trees, and we have seen these examples of giant trees that are like huge, like, and then all you have is a bunch of stumps. And then they're just cut perfectly across. Where's the rest of it?
Right.
Where did the rest of it go?
I made a video on exactly this subject. It's called Felling Titan Trees. And I talk about the different theories. I posted a link in the chat. And, I took up the subject of whether, directed energy weapon, the Vajra, the Fashis, all these things we've been talking about. But then I just wanted people to understand, and you can see it in the thumbnail, that there is steampunk technology that could explain cutting down something like Devil's Tower, for example. And you can see it right there on the screen. When they cut these blocks, the way they do it is they're using diamond rope saws. So all you need are two pulleys and a motor, and you've got a rope it's embedded with diamond, and they put a hole into the stone and then another hole in another location, and they basically can carve these perfectly straight lines. So if you had one of those horizontal, and I show an example in the thumbnail of a smaller version of that. So it's just, I'm not suggesting that that's what happened, but I'm just saying that you don't need to invoke titans, even though it's a subject I love, in order to explain how those trees could have been taken down if they were trees. There's also another theory that what you're seeing when you're looking at Devil's Tower isn't tree at all, that it's actually a form of slime mold called Stemonitis. There's like 30 different varieties of this particular slime mold that grows exactly like Devil's Tower. And the interesting thing is it grows on trees. So if you had a fallen gigantic titanic tree that was miles wide at the base, then something like Devil's Tower could have potentially been a slime mold. I made there's a video on my channel. I didn't make it, but I'll post that as well, because it's a fun thing to watch. It's a short one, like 8 minutes, but it's just presenting this theory that maybe Devil's Tower was a slime mold, and it's called "If Not a Stump, Then Maybe This."
Yeah, if you can share that video in the chat for us, that'll be great, Mike. And then let me just ask you real quick: how big do you think Devil's Tower, in its original form, could have been, in your opinion?
Yeah, I don't know. You can look at the width, and then you can look at the height. I'm guessing these trees stretched many miles up into the sky, though.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
I want to add
Go ahead.
something to that. So
Go ahead.
So there's two organisms in our realm today that have roughly the same size and foundation of what we see in Devil's Tower. One is a tree, and the other is the fruiting body of a mushroom. When we look at Giant's Causeway and Devil's Tower, we see this like irregular hexagonal structure, and it's like a cut across. So think about the myth of Alice in Wonderland. I mean, it is a myth, basically. Alice is eating off giant mushrooms to grow smaller and grow taller. And we have massive mushroom cults in the world. Basically, everything, every religion, every cult, they all have this mushroom imagery. And we still have them in power, basically. But we don't have the mushrooms anymore. But we have small mushrooms, and we still have trees. So another way to look at it would be these were not at all trees. These were mushrooms. And because because for mushrooms it's much more regular that they have these what do you call it? Well, it's like irregular hexagonal, like inner structure. You know, when you cut across. In other ways, trees are just as possible, and the problem with both is, of course, well, how do they turn to stone? Well, I don't know.
Yeah, well, the largest organisms in the world are mushroom, or not. The mushroom is the fruiting body. So the mycelial network, it's up in like the North Pacific Northwest. I think it's miles, stretches, many square miles. And even in the mainstream geological narrative, they tell us that the mushrooms reached as big as 12 feet and even bigger in the ancient world. So even the mainstream is acknowledging the existence of megaflora and megafauna. So if we think about trees that were, the size of that, it's on the screen, then how big would the mushrooms have been? Or if we think of that as a mushroom, how big would the trees have been?
Yeah, exactly. I think trees are more likely, but yeah.
Do an image search for Stemonitis, Stemonitis.
So on the question of how big is, what you do is just you take the diameter of all mesas, let's say, take the average, and then you look at what we have. You can either look at all trees or at all mushrooms for different calculations, and then put them in a ratio with the height of all trees or all mushrooms, and then you just get a number roughly what would be the rough average height, whether it's be a tree or a mushroom. So just sit down 10 minutes, take a pen and a paper, and just do the math, and then you get a very clear number. And it's a very large number, obviously, but those would be like a starting point, ballpark numbers to think about.
Yeah, simple math.
Yeah, no mystery about the height of these huge trees. If they were trees or mushrooms, very simple to answer that.
So all of those things you're seeing there on the screen, those are all growing on tree. And the video I linked shows them growing in high speed, so you can see that they take on these exact same forms. And porphyry faunolite, which is what Devil's Tower is comprised of, it's also known as columnar jointing, and I'm assuming that's because there's attachments between these fibers, which are said to be cooling lava. But it's pretty interesting. Yeah, if you go to like a third of the way in, it'll oh wow, I haven't seen an ad on YouTube in a long time. There you go. So you can see there's these little kind of joints where they meet, going horizontally. I think that's pretty fascinating how much like porphyry faunolite that looks.
But the bottom doesn't really work out.
Yeah, except the bottom of Devil's Tower, if you see it, it's all red earth. It's completely different from the tower itself. So that bottom portion could very well be covered up if that's what it is. I'm not making any claims.
What about the hexagonal kind of like shape to them though too? Can these like mushrooms become hexagonal in shape? And
yeah,
and not to go ahead.
They're actually considered slime mold. I'm not sure if they're even part of the fungi kingdom, but they appear to have that same hexagonal shape. Many of them, you can see it from above as well.
But would you just show it doesn't curve down? Would you just show it doesn't curve down really as we see on Devil's Tower at all?
Curve down? I don't know what you mean.
So on the side you see it's kind of straight at the top, and then it's tapering to the side downwards. You see that on Devil's Tower. Here you might be able to say that in some cases, but then at the bottom you have like this very thin things going on, and they look kind of irregular and really not like that. I mean, with a lot of imagination, maybe if it's like a science fiction film adaptation, but isn't it closer to a tree or a mushroom, if we're honest here?
I think so.
Oh, yeah. No, I definitely.
the size also
I lean
makes more
towards
sense.
tree. I lean towards tree, but I think it's interesting to ponder other theories, and it makes a heck of a lot more sense that it's organic than that was cooling lava.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, yeah. I don't think anybody believes that, but like, not to bring this guy's name up, but mud fossils. He was talking about how they were giants, like I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he talked about the causeways as being like the ankle, or even the Devil's Tower being like the ankle of this giant titans, and then it just kind of broke off or something like that, and these are like tendons and stuff like that. Have you ever heard this?
Yeah,
Mike.
That's his theory, is that the Devil's Tower is the Achilles tendon of a titan. There's no sign of heel anywhere, but when the
rest of
Achilles
the titan.
When the tendon snaps, you have what's called a wrinkle zone, and basically it doesn't snap perfectly clean, but it looks pretty clean across. So, and then he shows pictures of the histology, the tissues, and tries to make his case for that. To me, it doesn't make any sense because there's no sign of the rest of the creature. And the same goes for all of these other sites around the world where you have the columnar jointing. I don't think there's any merit to that theory personally. And he pushes it. And the other thing that I find very suspicious about Roger Mud Fossil University's channel is he avoids the giant tree topic like the plague. He never talks about it. And he's never talked about any of my work with regards to the Titan. I've done this series called Unveiling a Titan. He's never mentioned it at all, which is ironic because of all the research out there, it's the most supportive of his theory about Titan creatures. So why wouldn't he jump on that as a possible Titan find?
It's
agreed. 6-part series there. So to me, that's like a red flag that he's avoiding the trees. He's avoided my work on the Titan, and he's also avoided my work on the petrified organ subject, which is very compelling because I have so much physical empirical evidence. I've made many videos on the subject. He's ignored them. The original Heartstone that I found, I filmed a video of it and I sent it to him. I had no intention of making any videos about the subject, but I thought he would find it interesting. And I sent it to him, and he just was totally uninterested, which was mind-blowing to me because it was a better example of a mud fossil than anything he'd ever shown on his channel. granted, he's got some DNA analyses that he likes to wave in people's faces every episode, but you know, the stuff that he's showing, he's making a lot of claims and he's pointing at things and he's saying this is a this and this is a that, and here I was with a Heartstone that had 23 anatomical correlations, and he was totally uninterested in it. And then I thought, well, if there's some truth to that subject, that I should be able to find more, you know. And so I went out and I started finding a lot of these Heartstones. If you scroll down, that's one sent to me by a subscriber. That Petrified Hearts video there with Medusa in the center, those are some of the best examples of the finds that I've presented. And he's completely ignored all that research and then done a couple of videos of his own on the subject of Petrified Hearts that were truly mediocre. So I don't know what, you know, if he's concerned about someone stealing his thunder, he wants to be the only game in town, or if he's a gatekeeper or what. But there's extensive research on that subject that he's never mentioned.
That is kind of concerning a little bit, because he's got a big channel. He's got several 100,000 subs, I think.
No, 200,000.
Yeah, 200,000. Okay, but that's pretty big. That's a pretty, you know. So he should be addressing, at least confirming or refuting some of the stuff. I'm sure he must be aware of your work, Mike.
Just to clarify, just so people aren't confused, that stone that I was just showing on the video, the green one, I'm claiming that isn't a Heartstone because of the horizontal lines there. So it takes on that same shape as those other ones you're seeing, but it's completely different from them. I think that's petrified wood. I was just showing that as an example of what those other stones below are not, just to clarify.
So, I know, Mike, you did a great interview with Nachiketa. Everybody go check that out on Nachiketa's channel. But just because we talk about giants, this and that, and maybe this is one of the most interesting finds. I mean, Stellium 7 has found initially over 25 or something, now over 40, over 50, God knows how many correlations with this mountain that would correlate to the anatomy of a giant elephant. And maybe, Mike, just briefly, you want to mention what happened here with the crystal thing, because I think that's really peculiar and interesting and relevant for everyone to have heard at least once.
The crystal, you mean the eyeball? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay,
And
so
the
yeah,
crystalline spot that you found.
if you pause the video right there, the image on the right is from Google Earth, so it's not showing the actual inside of the cave, but you can kind of make out there's a portion that juts upward, and it looks like a wave that's about to crash. And I had already gone up to the eye socket there, the cave, many times in the past. And when I first got on this subject, I was very curious about the anatomy, and I remembered being up there and how weird the cave was, and it didn't make sense to me that it would form through these normal geological explanations. So I had a laundry list of anatomical features that I would expect to find if there was any truth to the idea that this is an eye socket. And the thing to the left is showing that the eye sockets of vertebrates in general, the head shape can change very dramatically, but the overall makeup of the bones, the structure of the head, is pretty uniform across vertebrates. And the eye socket is made up of 7 different bones, and you can see how they meet in different lines. So I knew that. I'm a chiropractor, for those who are not familiar with my research. So I'm familiar with human anatomy, and I figured, okay, I'm going to go up there. I'm going to see if there's any substance to this harebrained idea. And I found all kinds of anatomical correlations. The list of correlations to the mountain is over 50, and they're very specific. And I show them all with video and photographic evidence, and I compare it to the anatomy on the screen. So you don't have to just take my word for it. You can see what I'm presenting and decide for yourself. But I went up there again. Andreas Exertus was visiting with Victor Buge, and the 3 of us went up to the cave, and I was just showing him all the things that I had found and how they lined up with the anatomy perfectly. There, stop it for a second. To the right there is the that's one of the examples of a suture, which is where the bones meet. And then to the right there. Oh, just missed it again. That is, just back it up a touch more. There we go. That's that outcropping that I was talking about on the left side of the screen. Those clumps of rock. That's that part that sticks upward and it looks like a wave. The entire back side of that is covered in a 10-inch thick layer of quartz. And in my theories that have to do with titanology and the Heartstones as well, I believe that different forms of fat petrify to quartz when they petrify. And I didn't notice it, but when I went up there with Andreas and Victor, one of the two of them noticed this layer of quartz that I'd completely missed because it was so dirty I never saw it. But that lines up perfectly with the sclera of the eye. The white of the eye is all fatty. And that is one of the suture lines there between the bones. And it's exactly where it should be in the cave. So that's the Unveiling of Titan Part 2 video, I think maybe you're watching, or maybe it's Part 5. And then after I started making videos on the subject, they Google Earth censored the mountain, which is really fascinating. The 5th video, I show the before and after, because before you could see exactly what the if you go back to videos and then search by oldest, Part 5, that's good. Yeah, that's another, in that thumbnail, there's another correlation there. But so there you can see the eye is open. This is all Google Earth footage. That's a photograph. That's a photograph. That's Google Earth. See, the eye is open. I made three or four videos on the subject and then was in an interview one day. This is the 3D mapping that a team of archaeologists did in the Ear Canal, which I didn't know existed until I started doing this research. It's a crazy subject, and I could be wrong about it all, but I could be right about it.
No, it's really fascinating. It's really awesome.
Yeah, and that cave right there is exactly where, like, if you look at in humans just below the eye, in the jawbone, there's a hole that's called the infraorbital foramen, where there you can see that's the rocky part that's jutting upward that I was talking about. The whole back side of that is quartz crystal. It's just crazy. It was just, and there's the optic fissure, and then right there, pause it. So that little section there, that cave to the right, that's what's in the thumbnail of the 5th video. And that lines up with what I was just describing. Underneath our eye, we have a hole where nerve and blood vessel goes. And in the elephant, that is closer to the trunk. And if the elephant's head were to be tipped backward, and that's what this mountain looks like, is it looks like an elephant lying on its stomach with the head tilted backward, then that wouldn't be below the eye, it would be in front of the eye. And that's exactly where it is. So it's just one very, very specific anatomical correlation after another. So check it out.
I have a question here about, it's great having you here when you have done this extensive research on that stuff. So, I've seen these photos and I kind of had I didn't look into it too much, but I just had the hunch that, yeah, that's obviously what it is. And I thought, yes, so the whole Bacon stones and the Heartstones and that stuff, that seems pretty realistic, especially when we have huge trees petrified into gemstones as well. So there seems to be some overlap. And then I thought, okay, so if we look at the body as we find it now and we think about which tissue turns into which stone and gem and, like metal, like pyrite, or, this like fake gold or anything like that. And then there's like these, we have like alien transmissions, which say, or supposedly in the 80s, and they said your society will discover in a few years that your pineal gland is surrounded by crystals that enable you to basically communicate with the oversoul or something to that effect, right? But basically saying the brain is not a computer, it's a receiver or a transceiver, right? So I thought about that again, and I looked at these things and you're like, okay, so if you have ruby mines, and you have smaragd mines, and you have whatever lapis mines, and gold mines, silver mines, right? And how come all these fucking rich families know well that shit is? Now, okay, you can say, oh, you're serving and this and serving that. Okay, but maybe they just know where the giants died, and then they go in there and figure out where's the head and where's the asshole and where's the little finger, and then they find the ruby and the gold and the silver, because they know which tissue turns into which precious resource, right? And so they'll know exactly where to look for the pineal gland, and maybe they find ruby or diamond, or I don't know, right? But I was thinking along those lines and be like, well, if you know that shit, then it's easy to actually be rich. And you look at Elon, the Musk family, right? And they have smaragd mines. Well, how convenient. In Africa, they probably know where every fucking giant died, right? So what do you think about that?
It's not just that. You can just generate diamonds. You don't even need to find them. You can just make them. Just burn
Well,
a
that's
bunch
different
of sand.
though. Like that's a modern technology. That's but
that's not the point.
Yeah, but I mean, who's to say Elon Musk doesn't have that technology? That's what I'm trying to say.
No, I'm not talking about diamonds. You can find diamonds in your fucking backyard. That's not my point.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, everyone knows that. But I'm talking about giants and tissue turning to the hard version, and that being precious resources being used in technology and gem. And for some reason, these families knowing very well where to find them, and they probably also know about all this giant. And
see how the eye is all closed up there? Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, he's been showing all the footage I was talking about, the before and after of the eye being completely closed up. But yeah, you're absolutely right, and that's something I've said many, many times. I think why hide this if it's the true history? Isn't that really cool? Wouldn't everyone want to know? What would the vested interest be? Well, one, it would kind of debunk heliocentrism, the Earth size, the shape of things. If we had these gigantic beings walking around, but two, if things petrified, like you said, into lots of different kinds of materials, minerals, metals, etc., and they know it and we don't, then they've got to jump on all of us when it comes to going and finding those resources. So I think it's a combination of a lot of different reasons that they would hide this information.
Yeah. The question always becomes who benefits, right? And the people who are at the very top, who probably knows exactly what we're talking about. I think they probably know the Earth. Of course, they know the Earth is flat. Of course, they know that there were giants existed. And to David's point, that how do they know where all these precious stones exist? I mean, it's irrelevant now that we can make rubies and diamonds and all this kind of stuff. But back in the day, they have the contracts for these mining places. They just know where to go, and they know what they're looking for, because they probably know where the giants died, most likely, right?
What's also pretty cool about it, I'm just thinking about it now, because oftentimes the question is, is it just an old mining site, like David Hume Jr. likes to point out with Petra? Looks like it's only decorated up, but basically a mining site. However, this could bring together the idea of biogeology, giants, and then biological tissue petrifying into precious minerals, and the whole idea of making it into a mining site, and therefore maybe have elements of both, let's say both biological elements, if it is true that some of those were originally titans.
There's the crystal layer. Sorry to interrupt.
And artificial elements through the mining process. So I'm just, now it came kind of together in my head, is that it can actually be both. Things can both be a giant or titan or whatever and a mining site, especially if the titan blood turns into precious metals or whatever.
Yeah, indeed.
Well, didn't think I would say that a few years back, but here we are.
And weirdly, if you think about, think about the ocean floor, you have all kinds of sizes of things falling down. Of course, many things get eaten before they hit the ocean floor, especially the deep parts. But then you have many different sizes ending up down there. And, most of them is organic and gets eaten by bacteria, but you have some like exoskeletons. And in a similar way, it just could be that here on the surface, you have eyeballs as big as your fist somewhere petrified, and you might have eyeballs big as your house. And that's kind of that's like the real mysterious thing that I think, like, what the heck is happening here? You have these massive differences in size, but they're all in the same state. They're all very different from what we have living beings in now, that is like carbon-based, biological, and these are kind of petrified, but they are so vastly different in size.
Silicon-based, perhaps.
Yeah, but how could they have lived together? Because that's kind of where I'm, where for me where the buck stops, like where I can't really go a step further. So I don't know, maybe what's your thoughts on that? Where are these huge differences of sizes coming from, although they all in the same state now? They're all petrified.
Well, I think they became the sediments that we're now standing on, basically. So we're talking about different skills. So I think basically the world is the realm or whatever is going through these cycles. Could have different how do you say, different scales of life that are happening, you know, successively, and sometimes they they even how do you say, they even coexist, maybe temporarily. So that's why we have giants in our relatively recent memory and things like that. Meanwhile, those may have been from a completely different, how do you say, like a frequency of reality, and may have somehow been stuck here, or they may have died and petrified, and that's basically they became like mountains or whatever. And I mean, you have that in the ancient stories too, right? In the Edda, like Odin kills a fucking giant and turns his corpse into the world that we live in.
Sorry, was that a question for me? I was responding to somebody in the chat.
It wasn't a question. I was kind of expanding on your thoughts, because like what I'm saying is like there's multiple accounts and stories of like giants being and titans being killed and being turned into the world we live in, basically. So I think there were, you know, there are different frequencies or different timelines that are maybe coexisting, and one of those maybe what we perceive as silicon-based life forms that have petrified or whatever may have just been life forms from a different timeline, you know, that just are living their own lives and just kind of died and petrified and became like the ground we walk on.
I read a book years ago, you know, The Holographic Universe by, I think it was Dave Talbot, and it was, you know, talking about this basically the fractal nature of reality, that there are these different scales. And,
yeah, exactly.
And this is why I was open to the ideas of Roger Spurr when he. It's the only time I've ever been on video wearing a mask.
I'm just laughing.
So damn dusty in that place. Oh my God. So we went deep into, so there's another chamber behind the eye socket that goes deep and it goes down, and it's exactly where the sinuses should have been. But the, now I interrupted myself. What was I talking about before that? The fractal nature of reality. So I just, when I saw Roger's video on, he's talking about a 1,000-mile long dragon in the Sahara Desert. And he's shown it on Google Earth and all the different anatomical features. And I thought, okay, that's kind of fascinating. I have no idea if it's true or not, but I'm not going to close my mind to the subject. And then that kind of sparked my curiosity about this mountain. And when I started to look into it, I started to find way too much stuff. It's like, what are the odds of things looking like this and being so specifically, you know, lining up so specifically with anatomical features? So this would be a fractal level down from Roger's 1,000-mile dragon. This is about 5 kilometers long, 3.5 miles, and it's 753 meters in altitude. So yeah, take it or leave it. It's just an it was a 2-year study that I did that led to places I never would have imagined.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So thank you, Mike, for expanding. I just thought, since we have a resident, field researcher on this, and it is related to the whole old world giant topic, have you expand a little bit? That's great.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking, Raf.
Yeah, it's really great having you here. What happened to Alexander?
I assume he's reconnecting. He didn't say.
Oh, okay. I had to just step out for a second. What do you guys think about this? Let's just kind of finish up on this video, Old World Order. Is that okay, or you guys want to talk about something else?
Sure, we can. I'm fine with closing it down with that. I just was like, since we have an expert here, we can bring some original research as well.
Yeah. I mean, I'm okay. I mean, like most everybody probably have seen it, and just yeah, we don't have to watch it. So let's close it down for. I'll close the video down, and then I have some questions about Cabbage Patch Kids and stuff like this. Mike, have you looked into that at all?
Just what I saw from Mind Unveiled's channel
Yeah.
when he was addressing it, and I never watched the whole 10-hour homunculus video, but it's pretty interesting stuff. I don't know much about it though.
Yeah. I just wonder, like, where do we go from here? It seems like, we saw some people in the chat, and people are not, on board with the whole Tartaria / mud floods / meltology also. And I think there's truth in all these topics, and I don't like to just toss it out. And I certainly will say 100% that I don't believe in whatever history that they told us. But having said that, really what we're trying to do is trying to kind of like hone in on like what the actual history was, and what actually happened, and all kinds of strange stuff is happening, and what's the whole point of like hiding it all? I mean, we can guess why they're hiding, because they just don't want to know who we are, where we're from, and what kind of technology actually were available. But it's pretty massive as far as I'm concerned, and it seems kind of daunting sometimes trying to do these types of research, because there's so many different avenues to go down on, Anybody?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, like, why would they hide it? So just tying the things together now from this show is like, yeah, well, if it is true that the gold veins and so on actually are Titanic veins or whatever, still a millionaire and no reserve bank in the world which uses gold could be like, oh, we got this, or I don't know, whatever they say, yeah. But they'd have to say, oh, this is actually the blood of the Titans or something. I mean, I guess it would throw a wrench, but what it would, for me, the main reason as to why I hide any and all of this really comes down to economy. So would you be able to sustain a Federal Reserve System if people would know more about all of these things? I highly doubt it. And interestingly enough, this also seems to be the contention potentially with whatever old world coins we find, where we know we find all these gold coins, and now we only have all these copper coins. And yeah, if that's the business and you basically control all the economy or the money supply of the world through that, then you have enough resources, number one, to cover anything up that you want, and you will expend them certainly, so lest nobody ever gets the idea that they don't need to, try to fulfill some American dream that doesn't exist, or work or serve or slave away just for the fact to be able to be allowed to live, right? So all of those things, I think it does all tie together.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's good to focus. So the thing is, like, obviously that depends on what your interests are. It seems like, for example, Mike already has a very good grasp on what he's researching, among other things. but I think so. For example, one of the main criticisms that we saw was how all these different architectural styles are all lumped together under under one name, basically. So yeah, it's good to try, and because the thing is, like, it's not like we don't have the tools. We have Fomenko's new timeline. That's something we can work on. We have David Ewing Jr.'s work, among others. We have Didier Lacapelle, who I still have to read. But there's a lot of alternative timelines, for example, that we could use to make propositions of how this new chronology, let's say, would be structured, to make a selection, let's say, of a topic that we're researching. So for example, with Tartaria, I think what we're mostly looking at are recent cataclysms and structures. So we need to probably limit ourselves to this neoclassical style that we found, and see how those take, etc. And then if you want to look into other territories, you gotta focus on that aspect, let's say. I don't know if that makes any sense. But yeah, I think it's good to focus.
Okay. David, did you want to say something?
No, I'm good.
Yeah, well, it's difficult sometimes because, like, for me, like, I get a little bit interested in so many different subjects that I do kind of spread myself thin, but I don't really consider myself a quote unquote an expert on any one field either. So it's it's kind of interesting that, like different topics that can be discussed, right? So yeah, it's hard for me to choose.
The thing is, like, you're definitely it's definitely understandable, but what I think would be an interesting perspective would be if a truther, let's say, like us, with maybe some knowledge in architecture or whatever, or if a truther were to at an older age, let's say, having already let's say wakened up and discovered all these things that we're talking about, went back to college and took like an architecture course or something, or city planning or something like that that's relevant to his research, and try to compare that information like during his study, and like maybe writing like an academic work on that. That would be pretty interesting. I think it might be something that I might attempt in my own way, because I'm still thinking about doing a master's degree, but I think that would be interesting.
Good luck going back and explaining all the Jesuits and Masons.
Well, you don't have to explain it, but like having it like in the back of your mind and doing that comparative research and having access to all that information, and not just that, having access to the technical information. So if you take like an architecture course, you learn how at least theoretically, you're supposed to build these things. So you have the background information to actually make sense of the data we have. That's kind of where I'm trying to get at. Yeah.
Well, generally, I would agree with you, but you're giving the very generous assumption that not too many of the things that are being taught there are deliberately being taught in a way to mislead and obfuscate.
Yeah, sure. But then even then, if you have the experience of being a truther and you can compare the information that you're receiving with what you have already learned, that could also be interesting.
Well, we'll live stream your doctorate thesis then.
Yeah, if it ever gets to that, but I'm not going to study architecture anyway, so I have a different plan. But we'll get there someday.
All right,
You're just gonna
Nachikete,
sneak right past everybody, you know. You'll just nobody will. You have to be completely undercover, and you have to say, "Well, no, I
Exactly.
completely accept the history that you are telling me," you know, and just get that degree. But then, see, it's a very a sensitive thing because, like, you know, like we get these degrees at universities because, you know, we are hoping that that's gonna mean something, right, later on, because that's going to be a part of our credential, right? So we end up getting hired by these companies who are also indoctrinated by the same places, and it's a vicious cycle. That's what it comes down to. But we can't run away from it like completely though either. So I don't know what to do. I don't have any answers to it, you know.
I'm curious. There's a discussion in the chat with I don't know, admins or something, and it's very funny to observe that the people in the chat are generally pretty much open-minded and taking a neutral approach and inquiring stance. And the admin is more like, I don't know how to describe it, but seems pretty hell-bent on the position. That's just very curious.
I don't know what's going on. What are you talking about here?
Well, don't force me to say the things as I feel they are. I might get in trouble again, but that's like the nicest I can put it, you know me.
I think there might have been some people that weren't so on board with my theories, which is perfectly fine. Sometimes I'm wondering about them myself.
Well, anyone who takes issue with Stellium's ideas, and I take the authority to say that because I translated it with attribution, so at least I know the basics of what he's talking about. Try to explain it any other way, and I'm not saying it is this or that, but I know nobody who is as diligent as Stellium 7. So don't judge before you've seen the video and disproven at least 10 of the 45 correlations, and then please come back.
Yeah, and if you're speaking about Dreamlin over there, I mean, like, you know, like she is open-minded. I don't know what, I haven't been reading what's been going on in the chat, but like she's got thick skin, so you can say what you want, or, you know, so whatever, you know.
It was nothing offensive, and I don't expect anyone to believe the things that I believe. I do hope that people will check out information before they pass judgment on it, and actually give each idea its day in the sun before they start saying that there's no merit. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I was talking about her, but I don't even have any issue with you saying. It was more like I was just surprised that an admin would say like, oh, these experts, they're all like so in their own thing and in their own thing. And I didn't really hear anyone here today say like, it's just my way or the highway and you are all assholes and everyone is stupid. It was more like, if anything, we were like pussyfooting around and trying to make non-absolute statements and trying to basically clear up the air and say things are a little bit more nuanced than just throwing things out the window. But so I was just surprised to see that, because I didn't perceive anyone here today making absolutist statements and saying it's the way I see it and you're all dumb.
No, I think it's been a wonderful panel. You guys have been wonderful to speak with, and open-minded and clear-headed, and, you know, trying to reach a higher level of understanding and be intellectually honest. And it's refreshing to, that's why I'm still here 4 hours in. It's been awesome.
Well, we appreciate it, Stellium. So thanks for coming, and hopefully we can do this again in the future.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
Yes.
Anybody else? Any final thoughts before we start closing it down?
I had one.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, guys. So yeah, and I think, yeah, I think these talks are pretty productive, to be honest. If nothing else, to better define like our you know, our limits, let's say, but also our strengths, because we have figured out like what the strongest arguments are and what our weakest ones are, and how to cherry pick the opposition. So yeah, it's all pretty useful, I think.
I want to say thanks for joining Stellium. Was really cool you having on here. Raphael was he would always suggest to check out your channel to me when we get into conversation about the giants and the petrification, but I just never really got into the deep dive because then that usually I'm like lost for a week or two. And so I appreciate you coming on and doing the live demo on your content. That was awesome. Thanks.
And I really suck at short format also, so it does require time to go through the evidence that's been presented. I don't do TikTok and Instagram kind of videos very well.
Please keep it like that. Long format is what I think keeps our society together from falling apart.
Yeah, I completely agree. Long format is the way to go.
Yeah, and now, David, you revealed why I forced Mike to do a presentation. Thank you, Mike, because I knew someone didn't know it yet. I'm sure also some people in chat. And it's fascinating. It's worth checking out. It's something that seems so far out, but it's one of the few cases that Mike really diligently documented. And all I can say to anyone, like I said before, bring your evidence. Good luck. Yeah. So it's not random molten volcano ash or something. So
I've had some of my biggest critics have come from within the flat earth community, and none of them has ever addressed any of the research. They've just addressed the idea as a whole and just hand wave dismissed it and mocked it and that sort of thing. So I think it's nice when people actually go into the research, they find out that, oh wait, there might actually be some merit to this.
Yeah, for sure there's merit to it. I'm surprised as well, because the whole idea of being a quote unquote truther and a flat earther is that you are objective and you are digging, and then you start digging and then you don't get comfortable. You keep digging because the evidence is telling you that something is actually going on. And and I know what you're talking about, Mike, because there's some bigger channels out there. They could probably give you a little bit more spotlight, for the work that you have done, but just dismissing you like that is I think that's not cool in my mind.
Yeah, David Weiss once said that my research was more disruptive than flat earth. Coming from Dave Weiss,
that's bullshit.
That's a hell of a statement. But I mean, the point is that it's a reach. It's hard for a lot of people to swallow. But if the earth is flat and the realm is not what we think it is, then our history is probably our mythology and our religious texts are probably our real history, because we know history has been so thoroughly manipulated. So then things like megaflora and megafauna aren't such a stretch. And there's so much evidence for the great trees. So if the great trees were a real thing, then why not great animals? I don't think it's so far-fetched, in that context. And so check it out.
I think a lot of people have a lot of good things to offer. And, I wasn't necessarily on board with Meltology, but once I started looking into it, I figured for myself that there's something there for sure. And I think in my mind, all of these topics are interconnected. Really, they really are. There's a reason why we're not taught about them. So whoever that they are, they don't want us to know about that. So which makes me want to dig into it a little bit more. We need to find a common ground, including this mud. And this is part of the reason why we were having this discussion. It's not my intention to shit on AWAR or Wooden Nickels or anybody else. It's just okay, I want to hear from their perspective, because a lot of my friends, they are one friend, Rose, she was bringing up AWAR, and then she's like, oh, look, they're making great videos about this, and then, okay, let's take a look. I look at it and I'm like, I'm not really fully on board, and I needed other people to kind of look at that information with me so that we can be, as objective as possible. But if they are where they are, obviously I'm not interested in trying to, force people to think this way or that way about anything. But if people do care about the truth, we have to scrutinize our own stuff as well. David Ewan Jr., he's got a lot of scrutiny from people though too. And am I 100% on board with him? No, not necessarily. But has he opened my eyes to a lot of very interesting information? Absolutely. Now, again, I tell people with a caveat, like, take everything with a grain of salt. Go and do your own research. If you find something that is, contrary to what we present, please show it to us, because we all care to learn. I think that's what's important,
Yeah, I completely agree.
I think often the answer is E, all of the above. And what happens is people get attached to their pet theories, they run with them, they try to over-apply them, and then they end up running into conflicts with other people who are a little more rational and are like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. All the mountains were once buildings. Maybe some of them were. Maybe some of the big mountains were once buildings. Maybe some evidence of melt as well. You should find vitrification if there's any melt, because that's what happens when things melt. They vitrify and you get this smooth, shiny kind of a surface. And unfortunately, especially in the very beginning, I haven't dipped into meltology for a long time, but almost every video that I saw, they were pointing at all this stuff, making these grand claims about it and calling it meltology, and there were zero signs of melt whatsoever. Erosion, they could call it erodology, but there was no melt. So that, like, right off the bat, you're calling it something, and then you're showing something that doesn't even match the name of what you're calling it, and that's just stupid. So, and the guy that came up with the theory in the first place is a total nut job, but and an asshole.
Well, even worse.
I've had personal dealings with him, so I can speak from experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's nut job is kind of acceptable in a sense because we are all a little bit nut jobby, but like an asshole, that's just not cool.
No, it's not cool, but he is.
Unfortunate. How unfortunate. Well, I can't say one way or another about it because I haven't had any personal dealings with this gentleman whom you are speaking about, but I think we probably have an idea anyways. But any other final thoughts before we call it an evening, gentlemen?
As always, I'd just like to thank everyone for joining, everyone in chat, all of you, of course. Very interesting, fun, and a lot of relevant information and piecings together, as always. Let's proceed. Thank you, Nachiketa.
Thank you, Raphael, and definitely always good to have you here. And David, any final thoughts that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, also like to thank everyone joining. Thanks, Stellium, for impromptu joining, and this was cool having different perspective on this topic. I feel there's a lot more in that, maybe though not too closely in time, but I feel this, we as a society or species will learn more about this whole who are these giants laying around and we're mining them thing. So looking forward to that.
Alexander. No.
Yes. Well, yeah. Thanks everyone for joining. It's been a lot of fun. Mike in particular, it's been a pleasure making your acquaintance, and I'll be looking through your videos in the near future. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun, guys, and keep up the good work. I think we're on the right track. I think we can make it.
All right,
Yeah,
sounds good.
You guys are awesome. Thanks for inviting me in.
No problem. Anytime, Mike. You're always welcome to join us for this topic, or in the future, maybe a flat Earth conversation if you want to be a part of that. I'm trying to get some people together to talk about the flat Earth stuff as well. So hopefully we will, all just kind of. I think a little bit of humility goes a long way. I think politeness is the right approach in my mind, and the right intentions, having good faith. These are important attitude. Like modus operandi, you can say, to go about having these conversations. So that's where I stand. So anyways, thank you all for being here. Thank you, audience, for being here. And we had a very good crowd today. And I will probably end it now. I got to kind of get up early tomorrow. So see you guys all later. Bye for now.